Hello.
Hello. Hello. Hi, Mark.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome to Andrew Talks to Awesome People, as it says up in the corner. And we're having a party this week. It's the
Yeah, we are.
Bounce Factory release party. And there's no party like a release party, is there?
Never. I
Never.
forgot my air horn. I don't have one today.
What?
Yeah. I
Should we
know.
just cancel this and do it another time?
Yeah, that was fun. See ya.
Yeah. See ya. Welcome, one and all. So for those of you who don't know what's going on, some software got released today. It's an app that does stuff in Pro Tools. I'm going to tell you guys all about it, show you everything about it. This could go on for hours. I definitely want questions and things like that. I'm going to address a few things because there's stuff to address, but mostly just show you how it works and why I did it and how I did it and how it might make your life easier. So for the people who haven't experienced the fantastic promo video, should we roll the little promo video
Absolutely.
real quick so people have some idea what this is? Now, I just want everybody to know that the unbelievably awesome voiceover being done on this is by my wife, who was going to make a cameo appearance and then said no, she would not make a cameo appearance. But I thought that would be really good, but I don't think she's going to do it. So this is as close as any of you will ever get to meeting her, most likely.
She was there a minute ago and she did it live. It was pretty great.
Yeah.
It wasn't any processing from you.
Tingly. And you know, day after the Oscars, this kind of shit, you pay attention.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Awesome. All
right. Well, so here's the promo video.
Are you sick of bouncing mixes?
Yes.
Welcome to Bounce Factory, the automated solution for bouncing mixes.
So it bounces mixes for me?
Yes.
Does it bounce them without me?
Yes.
Does it solo and mute tracks?
You betcha.
Does it switch playlists?
Yes.
Does it bypass plugins?
Of course.
Does it bounce online?
Yes.
Does it bounce offline?
Yes.
Does it bounce stems?
Absolutely.
Does it poop rainbows?
Not yet.
Okay. Can it import the bounces into the session?
Uh-huh.
Can it put the bounces on new tracks?
Yep.
Can it put the bounces on playlists?
Sure.
Can it walk my dog?
Coming in version 2.
Can it export a copy anywhere I want?
Yep.
Can it message me when it's done?
Yeah.
Can it let me know after every bounce so I know what's going on?
Of course.
Will it open and close sessions?
Yes.
That sounds great.
Bounce Factory. Your mixes are ready.
I love that bear so much.
Yeah.
I can't begin to tell you how much I love that.
Yeah.
I'd scripted the question, but Andrew, who did the editing on the video, actually found the bear. And it's, you know, the rest of it is just filler. It's just so you can listen to my wife talk. But the bear is the best. And also, I would like to debunk one thing. It will not walk your dog in version 2. That's not going to happen. That's a lie. It's
false
marketing.
Advertising.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just marketing. But you hear it here first, how that is not going to happen. Okay. I suppose I got to be serious for a little while now. So what you saw is the promo video for Bounce Factory, and all of the things that I said yes to, or my wife said yes to, it does actually do. The dog thing, no. The rainbows thing, no. But everything else it does. So here, let me move this off my screen so we don't get video feedback. And you want to share my screen?
Yeah. Here we go.
So this is an app. This is an app what I wrote. So I'll just tell you some backstory. So about 2 years ago, coinciding kind of with the pandemic, but not because of it, some friends of mine had said, man, you got to try SoundFlow. And I was a little bit reluctant. I already had Keyboard Maestro. I was using that, but there were things that it just wouldn't do. And I thought, you know, the last thing I want to do is get into another program that won't do the few things that I want. And my friend said, no, you've got to check it out. And there's 30-day trials. So just see, like, all right, it's a subscription, which we're going to talk about subscriptions later on. But at first I felt like, no, man, I just want to pay outright for this thing. And then I got SoundFlow, and the one thing I'd been trying to do for years was to quickly be able to switch input on the bottom track of my session. And I had that working within about 10 minutes of installing SoundFlow. And like, okay, that's it. I will pay the $9.99 a month for this for the rest of my life just to be able to do that, because the way I work, that's how I switch back and forth between the rough mix and my current mix, or the last version I've printed and my revisions that I'm making now and all that kind of stuff. So I got into SoundFlow, and it was like, I guess it would be like people who, it turns out, are like really good at playing an instrument, but they don't know until they're in their 50s. SoundFlow for me was this thing where I just got it. There was something about the way it worked that made perfect sense to me, and the community and the forums for stuff that I couldn't figure out. And in fact, if you want to see the development process of this app, just go through the forums. I must have asked 300 or 400 questions about, hey, how do I do this? How do I do this? And there's always somebody there to say, well, try it like this. And then if something doesn't work, something else. And Christian, CEO of SoundFlow, is right in there giving tons of feedback, and he was super supportive through the process of doing that. He set up groups of developers to develop apps. And so over the course of the last 2 years, I have developed this app. So it started off as a script just to bounce a mix for me. So my way of working until it's time to actually print the mix is I work on the song, and then I print a revision for the artist to get, or whoever's going to be approving the mix. And that version will have an incremented number at the end of its name. I start at R1 and then it goes up from there. And I will always print it to the bottom track in my session, which is my print track, always. And I will always do that at the sample rate of the session, obviously, because it comes back into this track. I will always export a 44:116-bit version for approvals. And then I will always make sure that that mix ends up on a playlist on my print track, because I want every version that I've ever printed to be right there. So I wrote the script. It took me forever to get going, and there were all kinds of things that could make it trip up, but I just started making it better and better and better. And I had it like reading the track name down here to figure out what revision number we were on, and then incrementing the number. And I started automating more of this process until it got pretty cool. And I could just hit a button. And then I figured out how to export a copy after I'd imported into the clip list. Then I figured out how to get it onto a playlist of the same name. So I sort of built all these pieces of my workflow so I could hit one button on my Stream Deck, and it would print the mix, it would export a copy, it would put it on a playlist. But it turns out that, first of all, that's a workflow that a lot of people have, some version of that workflow for printing every single version of every mix they ever do. But then also, it became clear that that was really cool while doing the revisions, but what about while I was actually printing the mix once it was approved? Because at that point, you've got your main mix, and I'll walk you through like a typical set of mixes that I would have to print for a song. This is just a example session. It's the best song ever, just so you know. And I started thinking about, well, how could I take this thing that I had done and make it so that it could print multiple versions of the mix without me? Because it's the worst part of the job for me. Prepping a session is okay. You're discovering stuff. The mixing is awesome. The revision process can be great or bad if you've really screwed it up and whatever. That's a whole different thing. But then when it comes time to print, you've just been told this is great. That's exactly what we want. And now you have to spend the next hour, 2 hours printing versions of the mix. So you're going to print the main mix, the TV, the instrumental, the acapella. And then if it's got bad language in it, you got to do the clean versions of the acapella, the TV, and the main mix. And then you got to do stems. And for years, I would really rather not do stems, but I had to comply. So I would do drums, bass, guitars, vocals, like as few stems as I could possibly do. But then I started mixing in Atmos and realizing, like, wow, that's kind of a dick move. Really, you need to split stuff up. So, like, worst case, you do kick, snare, rest of the kit, bass, rhythm guitars, lead guitars or melody guitars, solo, keyboards, lead vocal, and then group your background vocals. But still, you're up to sort of 10 to 12 stems. And then on some of the albums I was doing, I wanted all of the background background vocals individually, but with all their processing and all their effects. So I can make a circle out of them and spin them around or just do things like that. So I was getting up to, I don't know, 30 to 35 stems per song, plus the 5 or 6 mix versions. And then if you have to do vocal ups, of course, that's even more mix versions. So we're talking, let's say conservatively, 30 passes per mix. And the way I mix, every single one of those has to go through the mix bus. There's processing that's got to be on there. And yes, it won't add up exactly to the mix, but it'll be pretty damn close. So that starts to get really, really onerous. And the problem with it is you go through your session, you say, okay, I'm going to print the TV mix, and you mute the lead vocals. You print the mix. And then you're like, okay, wait, where was I? Oh, that was the TV mix. Okay, cool. I'm going to do the instrumental mix, and you mute your background vocals and you print it. And that gets finished. You're like, okay, where was I? What was I doing? So you have these moments where you have to concentrate and be present and do it exactly right. And then you've got, let's say it's a 5-minute song and you're lucky enough to be printing at 2 times speed. You got 2.5 minutes of it bouncing. Then it comes into the session. Then you've got to export a copy. Then you got to put it on the playlist. And then you're ready to do your next pass. So it's all of this very meticulous work surrounding the most boring bullshit in the world, which is actually watching it bounce. So I said, I'm going to figure out how to do this. Fast forward a little bit. And I said, well, okay, how am I going to do this in a way that's actually going to be useful, not just for me? Because my script that bounced reference mixes for me was very specific to me. It knew what track in the session I was printing on. It knew how I like to name things. It knew exactly where I was going to put files. That's not the way this works. So I decided I'm going to write an app that generalizes the process. And over the course of 2 years, and then a lot of beta testing by people like Mark, and Chris Shaw and Franklin been super, super helpful and testing for this. It's turned into Bounce Factory, which is released today. So the first thing is it runs on SoundFlow. So you got to have SoundFlow to have it, and it's available in the App Store. The package is free, and there's a 30-day trial of the full featured app. And we're going to talk about pricing later because it's a big part of it, and there's already been some comments about the pricing. I just want to talk about why it is what it is. And I think it'll make more sense once you see how it works. So, Mark, unless I've just bored everybody to death, should I just go ahead and start doing this? What do you think? Oh, you're muted. Sorry, man.
Make it do things. Also,
make it do things. Okay. That's what the comments. Great. So
I'm pretty excited about this
game.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So if you're bouncing mixes at a hockey game, all right. So let's say that I have just mixed the best song ever, and the producer has said that is the best mix ever of the best song ever. Print it. Fantastic. What do? I open up Bounce Factory. Now this is a fresh install of it, so I am not even running a trial yet. But that doesn't even matter. I can actually do quite a bit just on the free version, which once the trial runs out, you will still have the free version. So here's what we're going to do. The first thing you do to use the app is you take a snapshot. Taking a snapshot is like doing a save as of the session, but without having to do a save as. So the snapshot, and we're going to come back to this later on, so don't worry if you don't quite understand what I'm talking about. But basically, the snapshot will take a snapshot of every single thing in the session except for the actual audio edits that are on the timeline. So it knows all of your send assignments and send levels. It knows all of the plugin settings and the plugin assignments. It knows what playlists every track is on. It knows what volume it's set to. It knows what inputs and outputs they're assigned to. It knows the panning. It knows what's muted, what's soloed, everything except the actual edits. Then when you actually go to bounce stuff, you tell the app, well, how much of that stuff do you want me to recall? That'll make much more sense later on. But what we're going to do is say, okay, I've opened up my session and best song ever is ready to print. So I'm going to take a snapshot. And the first thing it's going to say is, hey, you haven't made a timeline selection. Do you really want to bounce the entire timeline? And I could do that, but we'll just bounce this little bit. I just made a little region group on my print track to say this is how much I'm going to bounce. Say okay. And it brings us into the window where you set up your snapshot and all of your mix passes. Okay, the hierarchy of stuff is you've got your Pro Tools session, then you've got a snapshot which knows what session it's tied to. That is all of the settings in the session when you click proceed down here. And then you've got mix passes that use that snapshot. So I'm going to set this up just like I would if I were actually printing this mix. So the main mix that goes with the snapshot, which is called the standard mix pass, is exactly how I leave the session with this name in this format, etc., because this should be pretty familiar to you. This is basically the Pro Tools bounce dialog, but with some extra added features and some pretty cool color coding to let you know what's going on. So the first thing is I want to make sure that I'm bouncing wave. I'm bouncing my mix source is print, because that is actually what I print. But let's say you wanted to use a different source. If you click this, instead of it just being a pop-up menu that you don't know what's used or whatever, part of the setup process for bouncing the snapshot is it goes through the session and finds out what are all of the valid sources that you could bounce. So I know that mine is print, and using the great SoundFlow fuzzy search, I get here and it says print stereo, and that's the one. Great. If you're somebody who prints multiple sources, you can absolutely do that. Instead of having it grow one line at a time, you just hit the plus key, and you can now see all of the, I believe it's 24 sources that you can print. So your main source is up here. And then when you click plus, you get the same searchable dialog to say, I'm going to print the toms separate. I don't know why you would do that. I only ever print one stereo bus because I'm always printing just my mix bus processing. But if you print multiple buses at a time, and I know there are a lot of post-production workflows where you do that, you can absolutely set that up here, and it'll show you how many sources are being bounced. So even if the window's closed, you know that your sources are there. Okay, that's the top here. File name, file type, mix source. Yeah, Mark, what have I?
Oh yeah, I was just going to say, for anybody that's confused about that, we'll come back to it. So there's just so many details inside of this thing that
that's why I'm going to not go off into the weeds for this one mix pass, and then we'll come back to it.
Perfect.
Well done. Okay, so the three parts of the bounce mix dialog that are always going to be showing in the app are the top, where you set the name, the main file type, and the mix source, then the audio panel. So this should look almost exactly like the audio panel you're used to. One thing you might notice, though, is that the sample rate is showing green. That's just a visual cue so that you know you're bouncing at the session sample rate. Now, if I said, I'm going to bounce this at 44.1, it goes orange, yellowish orange. I don't know what color that is. I kind of like it though. What this is showing you, and this color coding is consistent throughout the app, is you're doing something that is perfectly legal, but either it's less common and it might not be what you intend, or it is just something that keeps you from being able to do something else. So just like in the bounce dialog in Pro Tools, you notice when I went to 44.1, import after bounce is now disabled. I can't import after bounce. So if I wanted to make sure I was bouncing at the session sample rate, I could go back into this menu and select it, or I can do one of the things that's actually really cool. There are all these little quick fill buttons, and there's a key right here that shows you L will fill in information from the last snapshot that you took. S will fill in information from how the session is right now. So what the bounce dialog would look like if you opened it in the session, or some session settings. And T will load information from whatever track is selected in the session. I'll show you all these things in a minute. So I can very quickly set the sample rate back to the session by clicking on S, sets it back to session. And now you'll notice that import after bounce is available, and it's orange, yellow, whatever that is, because it's available, but you're not doing it, just to draw your eye to it to say, hey, that's available. So now I'm going to say I'm going to import after bounce. And now you'll notice something else turned yellow. And this is something you do not get in the standard bounce dialog, which is export a copy after bounce. So if you are importing into the session, then the app will pluck it out of the clip list, and you can export it in any format to any directory on the disk. So this is basically selecting in the clip list and doing export selected clip as files. That's what this dialog is from. And again, you can fill it from the snapshot or from the way the session was set up, set your destination directory, and you can bounce any format you want. There are a few other things that will come up in the bounce dialog depending on what you do. So let's say you are going to bounce, or let's say we're going to bounce a wave, but we're going to add an MP3 to that. You can do that, and then your MP3 settings will come up. Normally, you don't see these until you actually click bounce, but if you did that, then you wouldn't be able to do it unattended. So this is the bounce MP3 settings dialog, and it defaults the same way it does in Pro Tools, though it will automatically update the year, which is kind of nice. And here's just a little bonus about the SoundFlow searchable menu things. If anyone watching this has ever gone into this genre menu, it's one of the stupidest, longest lists in the history of stupid long lists. And if you've got to manually scroll through this thing, especially on a small screen, it sucks. But everybody knows that every song in the world is booty bass. So you just start typing and you get booty bass. And now you're bouncing a booty bass MP3. I've loved that genre since they started bouncing MP3s in Pro Tools. I've never seen it anywhere else, and I'm hoping that one of the programmers at Avid made that up. So anyway, this is your MP3 settings dialog. And now, because we're bouncing an MP3 over in this additional settings box, you'll see that the bounce MP3 settings are available, and I can go back in here and do that. The video settings, the ADM settings, and the export MP3 settings are also available here. So I don't know why you would want to do this, but let's say you needed 2 MP3s of different bit rates in different directories when you were done. The export MP3 settings are completely separate from the bounce MP3 settings. So we got booty bass over here and no booty bass over here, which is a mistake because, again, it should be booty bass. All right, I'm going to put this back to wave just cause why not?
Everybody's just typing booty bass in the chat comments right now. It's pretty great.
Good. I hope everybody, yeah. And if you've never noticed that booty bass is an available genre, I hope I've just changed your life more than this app will.
Yeah, this is the best part of the video so far.
Great, great. All right, so I'm going to set this up the way I would set up to actually bounce a mix. So we're bouncing 24-bit 48K interleaved. I'm going to go ahead and let it bounce into the bounced files folder within the session folder, but just like in Pro Tools, you can choose any directory anywhere you want. Then down here is the import destination. So after you've bounced, if you've said import after bounce, you get the little dialog that says, hey, do you want to put it in the clip list or on a new track? That's what's here. And then you've got all your location options, session start, song start, selection, or spot. And spot, that's a mistake. Don't do that because that likes dialogues. You don't want dialogues when you do this. But the point of this is there's a third selection lurking here, which is you can go to a clip list or a new track or an existing track. If you say existing track, it will default to whatever the selected track was. And this means that I will print my WAV file in my bounced files folder at 48K 24-bit. I will then import it into the session. It will go into the clip list where I will export it as a 44.1 16-bit to whatever destination directory I've done here. And then I will make a playlist on the track print track, and I will drag it out of the clip list and put it onto that playlist wherever it was actually bounced. So those are the 3 parts of the way I bounce stuff that are now part of the process. So this snapshot, I'm just going to go ahead and click proceed, and we'll just do this. I'm going to kind of follow the outline of the way that I've got the tutorial videos. So if you've already watched the tutorial videos, this is some repeat stuff, but hopefully it'll help you figure out what's going on. Oh, the other thing is with the bounce selection, where it told me, hey, by the way, you didn't have a bounce selection. You can update that before you bounce just by saying capture, and we could bounce that, or we could bounce this. It doesn't matter. You can update this before you hit proceed. When you hit proceed, that is when the app will take a snapshot of the session. So while you're setting all this up, you can be tweaking plugin settings and adjust final volumes and kind of get everything ready to go. And then you click proceed. Mark, did you want to interject before I hit proceed?
Yeah, I just want to for people that are just joining in, I just want to kind of interject something here. One of the powerful things about this is that we're going to be able to do it for multiple songs. It's going to be opening and closing things. It's going to be a lot more than just bouncing the one session. So
yeah, exactly.
Say that for the chat room.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
So
yes,
we'll get to all of that in a minute, but
yeah, I'm showing kind of the basic thing. So what this is I'm setting up to bounce one mix and I'm just going to save it for later. And when I first wrote the app, that's the way the app worked. So I would say proceed here, and this would be the best song ever, main mix. Whoa. And again, Mark doesn't believe me that I can't actually type. And so it'll go through, grab a lot of information about the session right now, and it's doing a bunch of stuff, which is all very exciting. And it tells you what it's doing, and you even get a progress dialog, so that's something. And then if video streaming hasn't screwed everything up, here we go. And we're back out at the front, and we have the best song ever is our session name, and the snapshot name is best song ever main mix. And that's going to print one pass of the session. And that's the way this was for several months. So now if I was going to do my, let's say my TV mix, I would mute this track and I would say take snapshot, and all those other settings would already be set. I'd only have to type the name and click proceed, and would do a snapshot. And then I would mute the backgrounds and do the instrumental. And then I thought, you know what? That's ridiculous. It doesn't take that long, but it's ridiculous to have to do a snapshot every single time all I want to do is mute or solo tracks. So what I did is I made it so that the snapshot data can be overridden by the solo, the mute, the playlist selection, and the automation mode. Those are the only four things that can override the snapshot itself, but those are the four things that will allow you to do a lot of mix passes within one snapshot. So let's go ahead and we'll ignore the snapshot we just took, and I'm going to show you how we can set up every single mix pass for this session, with the exception of vocal ups and vocal downs, which we'll talk about afterwards. I can set up everything as additional mix passes within this snapshot. So we've got our snapshot. We're still set up the way we were for the last one, so except the export after bounce isn't there. So I'm going to go ahead and click the L, which will reload this from the last snapshot we took. That will put everything back the way it was. The only thing it won't do is fill in this destination track, because you can fill in from the last snapshot you took in a different session. So if you're setting up to bounce a whole record and the only thing that's changing is what track you're bouncing to and what session you're in, then you can hit this L, it'll load up everything, and then you just come down, make sure your print track is selected, and hit the T button here, and that will fill that in. Another thing I forgot to mention in the videos, which is actually cool, if you use the bounce dialog presets in Pro Tools, this will suck them out of Pro Tools. Then you can save them inside of the app, adding all of the extra buttons that are there. So if you've set up 5 sort of templates for the way you bounce mixes, bring them into the app, add the added functionality in terms of what types of stuff you're exporting, whether you're putting it on existing tracks, et cetera, and then just resave into the same slots. And now you have the smart version of what you've already got in the bounce dialog, but you don't have to remake it. And when you are recalling these presets, this is like down in the dirt, special weird little functions. I was finding there were times that I wanted to recall the location part of that preset, but I didn't want to mess with the audio portion because I was bouncing a different format. You can actually preset recall enable different parts of the dialog. So anyway, this is just the granular, stupid detail I've put in, because everything that bugged me about the app, I fixed for myself. And now for you. Okay, so without this taking too long, I want to go ahead and make all of the other mix passes. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do our TV mix. To do that, I use VCAs, and the way my VCAs work is they control a group that's every single audio track in that food group. So that way I know if I mute the lead vocal VCA, all my lead vocals are muted. There's no way they're going to sneak into a reverb or anything like that. You could just as easily do this by selecting audio tracks or doing whatever. I'm going to do it using VCAs because it's the way I work. So I want to do a mix pass with the lead vocal VCA muted. Your instinct would be to mute this and then click over here somewhere, and it would say, great, find out what's muted and make that a mix pass. That's actually really inefficient, because it would have to check every single track in the session to see if it were muted before, and is it muted now, and what's the difference between the two. So instead of that, what you do is you select the track, and then all of the additional mix passes work off of the track selection, not the state. So there are 3 that you can add just by hitting a button. The very first ones we're going to do are these 3 here. These are add selected track certain types of passes. So I want to add a selected track mute pass. whatever tracks are selected are going to be muted. Otherwise, it's exactly the same as the snapshot that we're going to take. Click this. It says, okay, what do you want to call this? This is my TV mix. Hit OK. Grabs a little bit of information about that track. So if we had switched its playlist or whatever, it would know that, and it adds it to the list. So now we have our standard mix pass here, which is our best song ever main mix. And we have a muted tracks pass, which is our best song ever TV mix. Okay, now I'm going to do the instrumental mix. That's another selected track mute pass, but I've got 2 tracks selected, right? So that's instrumental mix. Again, it's going to double check these tracks. It never assumes anything because you can create playlists while you're doing it. I don't recommend it, but you could absolutely change the session as we're going, and it only matters how you leave it when you click proceed. Okay, now I need a pass with those 2 tracks soloed. So it's exactly the same thing, but it's the add selected track solo pass instead of the mute pass. Okay, so great. And this is going to be my acapella mix. And we're going to add that. Now, if you had to do a lead acapella and a background acapella, you would just select the lead VCA, click the selected track solo pass. That'd be your lead acapella. Select the background VCA on its own, add a solo pass, and you'd be done. Okay, and now let's say that this song has some bad words in it. So I'm going to switch my verse vocals to clean playlists. I'm going to select the tracks. And the third type, where you just select the tracks and then tell the app how you want to bounce it, is to say, okay, I want to add selected track playlist pass. So what this does is it says, for the selected tracks, I'm going to get playlist information, but otherwise everything is going to be the same as a snapshot. So it will not solo and it will not mute as part of this. We're going to get to that in a second. But this will go through and it'll pop up the little playlist menus in a second and say, great, those are your playlists. I got you, all good. Then we set them back to the main playlist because that's going to be our main pass, right? Our main mix is however we leave it. Great. So those are the 3 things you can add really, really quickly by just selecting some tracks and saying, hey, I want those soloed, I want those muted, I want those switch playlists. Okay, now what about we have to print a clean acapella mix? So that's a combination of tracks that have switch playlists and tracks that are soloed, and it's not even the same tracks. That gets into one of the 2 more advanced batches, which is, here, actually, I set these back. I should have left them on clean. It's called a mini snap. So I'm going to select my 4 tracks. I'm going to click add batch. It's going to gather some information about these tracks, just like it did before it added the pass. But before we add the pass, it's going to bring me into another dialog. And it's going to say mini snapshot on the top. And what am I going to call this? This is going to be my acapella clean, right? And this will override the solo, mute, automation mode, and playlist selection. And just really quickly, the reason automation mode is in this is because if you've done mute automation, then obviously just muting a track isn't enough. So if it's got mute automation, you would switch the automation mode to off at the same time you add either a selected tracks mute pass or you do a mini snapshot. But in this case, all I'm going to do is now go and set up the session how it needs to be when I print this on my selected tracks. I'm going to click add. I'm going to get a dialog to explain this because I know it can be slightly confusing because for the other ones, you just select the tracks. But for this one, you actually solo and mute and switch playlists and do all the stuff that you want for this. So that's what this dialog says, is make sure everything's cool. And then it reminds you, don't forget to set them back the way they're supposed to be before saving the snapshot, because that's how they'll be for all the other mix passes. Click OK. And it's going to grab the rest of the information it needs. And boink, 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 and boink, boink, and put everything back the way it is. Now, another thing we haven't noticed here. So we've got our best song ever a cappella mix, and that is a solo, best song ever a cappella mix clean, and that's a mini snap. The thing I haven't mentioned is there's a lot of times you've seen the memory location dialog come up and the window configuration dialog come up. That's because to do certain things, it has to set all of the tracks to a certain height because that guarantees that it can see all of the inserts it sends. It will show all the inserts it sends if they aren't already. It will show the track list. It will show the clip list at times, but it will always put the session back exactly how you had it before you clicked whatever button it was that made it have to do stuff. So it's not going to mess up the view of your session, because there's nothing worse to me than that. All right, so we're done with our acapella Dubry What's It, and I'm going to switch these guys back. So we're back now to our main mix pass, but we're not done, because now we got to print some stems, right? Okay, so I'm just going to do, like, if we were going to do our basic set of stems, I'm going to select my VCAs, one for each food group, and I'm going to say, great, I'm going to print a stem for each of these. Now, I could select them one at a time and say add selected track solo pass, and it would bring up the naming dialog, and I would say drum stem. And then I'd select the bass VCA, bass stem. But again, I got bored doing that, and I thought there's got to be a better way to do that. And so that's the bottom half of this add batch dialog, which is really like the advanced mix pass dialog, but add batch fits nicely onto this small blue button. So that's what I did. So we're going to say stems, and this is it's actually kind of ridiculously powerful. So what this will do is it will add a mix pass for each of the selected tracks soloed individually. So it will go through each one, solo it, bounce, go to the next one, solo it, bounce, go to the next one, solo it, bounce. But you have very powerful naming options for these mix passes. So I'll make this a little bit bigger, because it is hard to see when you're not at a high resolution here. So you've got a base name for your stems, and it defaults to whatever your mix name is, but I'm just going to call this best song ever. Then you get a separator if you want to do that. Then you can have a mix pass prefix or a mix pass suffix, and this goes before or after the name of the track that's selected. So you'll see here an example, and this shows the example of the first track that was selected, which was a VCA just called drums. When it solos that track, it's going to print a mix called Best Song Ever, space dash space, which is my separator here. I could get rid of the spaces, and then it'll zip it up there, but I like to have the spaces. It's the way I do. But a lot of people will use underscores, which is probably a better way to do it, but I don't know. I don't like that. Machine readable is one thing, but I'd like to be people readable. And then it's got the word stem, and then it puts the separator again, and then it puts the track name. Now, I could, if you're the kind of person who wants to put stem at the end, I could do that. Whatever you want to do. And it's smart enough to not put extra separators in and things like that. Okay. So we'll put this back to stem. But it's only showing you the name of what the first track is going to be. So let me see what all of them are going to be. Click on rename stems, and you get a table showing you here are your track names, and here's what the stem part of the track name is going to be. And they're all good except BG1 VCA. That's crap. We're going to call this BG box. Okay. And so it's going to give me 6 mix passes, one each for each of these VCAs soloed, and they're going to be named this, but they're going to solo these tracks. All right, cool. So I say done, and I say add. And it doesn't have to get any more information because it got it all on the way in. And now at the bottom of my list is stems, best song ever, 6 mix passes. Okay. So that's cool. But then because I'm doing an Atmos mix, I want all of my background vocals separate. So I'm going to select all my background vocals, and I'm going to click add batch again. And it's going to go through and grab the playlist information and stuff like that about each of these tracks.
And when you say separate, do you mean as one stem?
Each one of these tracks will be soloed separately.
Yeah.
So this brings me back to the exact same dialogue, and I'm going to, again, get rid of main mix. Though a lot of times I actually leave the revision number. So if I was printing on R4 or something, I will leave R4 in the name just because I like to know where stuff came from. But now we get an example of best song ever, stem, verse whisper, vox L plus .01. All right, that's no good. I got to rename them. Now you might have noticed at the bottom here, strip Pro Tools editions from stem names. This is another thing I did because I was angry. I had to do something like this, exactly like this. I had 30 tracks selected. Every single one of them had either a playlist number or .cm or dupe.01 or something at the end. So I wrote code, you click this button and it wipes all that crap off the end of your name. So now we're just the names of the tracks. Now, if you wanted to get rid of the plus, that's not a Pro Tools edition. So you'd have to go through manually and do that. If you want to rename these, you can absolutely clean up the names. But if you need to just quickly get rid of the .01, click Strip Pro Tools Edition, say done, and say add. And now at the bottom of my list, I've got another batch of stems, and I get 16 mix passes. The only other thing I want to mention here is that we still have our standard mix pass, but let's say you've already done all your mix passes and you're just bouncing stems. You don't have to bounce the standard mix pass. You could delete that, and then it will only bounce the additional passes. And you'll notice that you get an extra button, and that's why this space has been left here. That will add the standard pass back in. So the standard pass is just recall the snapshot, however much of it I tell you to recall, bounce the mix with whatever name I leave here. That's the main mix pass. All of these other mix passes are take the snapshot, but then either solo or mute or switch playlists or change automation mode or some combination of those for the selected tracks, and then bounce the mix pass with the name that I told you. I'll add the standard pass back in because why not? That's it. Now I can click proceed again. And what it will do is collect all the same information, because I could have changed all kinds of things. I could have changed plugins. I could have changed volume levels if I were doing vocal ups, things like that. So it will gather all the information again, take the snapshot, get a bunch of info, blah-de-blue. Now it's going to set everything back the way it was. And then it integrates the snapshot data. And now here we go. So we now have a lot of mix passes, right? That's pretty good. Pretty good. Now, you might also say, well, this list looks unwieldy. I don't know what the hell is going on here. So let me talk about the list. So, Mark, have I been good about doing the snapshot thing? Does that make sense? Did I miss anything?
No, I don't think you've missed anything. It's a lot of information really quick.
It's a lot.
And we're about to get to some bouncing stuff.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. So what I wanted to show you was, I mean, and obviously I talked all the way through it, but I could have set up all of those mix passes in probably, I don't know, a minute and a half, 2 minutes for this session.
And
like,
I was
that's
just
how long it
thinking,
would take me.
when I start asking you a couple questions, I might have you actually do that while you're thinking about answering the question. Just set up a bunch of passes so people can see the work.
Yeah, I mean, if you want, well, should I just do that right now? I'll just delete all of these and I'll set all of them up again in one go.
Yeah, because it's not that big of a deal. It moves that fast. Let's do it.
Okay. So I'm going to delete everything. And now let's take a snapshot, right? So I'm ready to mix. I'm ready to print. I mean, so take a snapshot. Boink. This is going to be my main mix. Is going to be this. Then I need to print my TV. So that's with that muted. So that's going to be my TV mix.
I already have a feature request for version 2, and that's that you do some sound effects and do some talking along as it moves around on the screen.
Well, you want me to like come over to your house and
yeah, or just have it with every action, like beep, bop,
yeah,
boopity, boop.
yeah, that wouldn't be annoying at all.
I mean, you could add a switch to turn it off.
That's true.
We had a funny comment in the YouTube saying this is what happens when audio engineers learn JavaScript.
Yeah, it is. It really is. Yeah. There are so many features that were such a gigantic pain in the ass to put in, but I wanted them. And like, all right, like this didn't switch playlists until pretty recently. And I finally got so sick of having to save a session with the playlist flip that like, no, I'm making this work. Yeah. And it was brutal, but yeah, it works really well. And I'm going to set this up based on my last snapshot. And so, to change destination directories and stuff like that, it's exactly like it would be in the bounce dialog. You just choose a directory and say go.
Yeah. So I want to point out, we've already got a main mix, a TV mix, an instrumental, and an acapella. That's usually the bulk of what a lot of people have to pass. And it took you about 2 minutes while I was talking to you. Not even 2 minutes.
So let's just go through. I'll do this one again. I'll do my basic stems. And we got to do our clean as well. I didn't do that. But we'll do our stems first. And this is where it's checking playlist info. Because again, it doesn't have to be VCAs. It can be audio tracks, it can be auxes, instrument, whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
Okay, so this would be stem drums. I know I got to rename this guy. The rest of those look good. Done. I'll add those. Now I'm going to do my background vocal stems because for whatever reason I want those separate. I'm going to add those. And a lot of the time it takes here is actually just so it can set your screen back the way you had it.
Right.
If I could leave your session a mess, this would be so much faster. But you wouldn't like me.
You probably get a couple angry emails.
Yeah. So again, I'm just going to go to the base name. And actually, we'll call this BG Vox, right? Will be my base name. And then for the stems, I'll just do this and say done. And now I want to point out one other, no, I'm not going to do it. There's other stuff. I'll talk about this later. All this stuff that it's actually checking for you as you go, because there's a lot going on behind the scenes to make sure you can never tell it to do something that it's going to turn out it can't do later. It will always be able to bounce any mix pass you do. And there's a lot of error checking going into that, which we'll talk about in a sec. So the last thing I got to do is my acapella. Oh, this will be my acapella clean, and then I'll do my main mix clean because I haven't done that yet either. So this is a mini snap, and this is acapella clean, and solo these guys and say add and okay. And set the session back and clear my solos. And now just select these guys because I need to get a playlist pass because we haven't done that yet. So this is our main mix clean. Right. Okay, and then just have to switch these back. It's a very important concept to get that however you leave the session when you hit proceed, that is what the snapshot is doing, except for the selection. You don't have to make sure you've remade the selection. You have to manually override that. It grabs it as you go into the snapshot, because I figure if you're like me, the best way to select tracks is clicking here. Clicking on track headers sucks. So you're going to change your selection a lot. You don't need to worry about getting your selection back.
Yeah, the way I think about that too is just if I'm hitting perceive, it's like I'm hitting save on the session. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So this will be my main mixes. Okay, and then while we're at it, I'm going to do a second snapshot that is going to be for our vocal ups, because then we can talk about what does it recall when it actually does the snapshots, right?
Yeah, but let's do a recap as soon as this is done.
Okay.
Because this is pretty wild.
Yeah, well, I'll show you the list too, which will help. So
yeah.
I've just made all of these mix passes. So all my mixes, I got all these different stems, lots of different stems, a cappella, blah, blah, blah. I'm switching playlists, I'm soloing, I'm muting. So this list already...
20 some in here?
Well, let's find out. You can have it ungrouped, which is just a flat list. Now, we only have one snapshot, so we're only seeing mix passes from one snapshot. But think about if you're doing these mix passes plus vocal ups for every song on a 12-song record. So you'd have 24 snapshots that you're taking. And those 24 snapshots would have, let's see how many mix passes we've got here. So if I say grouped, it's going to say, well, for that session, you've got one snapshot, double click, and that has 28 mix passes that we just set up.
So let's pause for a second there. How long is this? Okay. I know that your selection is smaller because we're doing an example here, but this song is how long?
Oh, I don't know.
We'll just say 4 minutes, right?
Yeah.
So this is going to save you 112 minutes. That's almost 2 hours of time that you don't have to sit in front of your computer.
And here's the thing I was talking about before. I could concentrate while I'm setting up each mix pass, and I am focused and I do it. And then I set up the next mix pass. I set up the next mix pass. I'm working down a list in my head or on a piece of paper, whatever. And I know they're all set up, and now I can stop thinking about them instead of set up a mix pass, wait for it to finish. Now set up a mix pass. So forget about the fact that you have to sit in front of the computer while it does it, which sucks.
Yeah.
Anybody who does this knows how mind-wrecking it becomes to do that. But it's also the idea that now, okay, I've got to be focused again. And where was I? Like, that's ridiculous, especially because you're usually doing this on time that you're already tired. You're not going to take like your creative time in the day to bounce these things.
Right.
You're going to do it at night because, like, oh, all right, I'll do it now or whatever. Okay. So this is 28 passes, and it took me, I don't know, 3-4 minutes to set up, something like that. Maybe a little longer, whatever it is. But this is the 28. And now if I were going to do a vocal up and a vocal down, I would just turn these up, however much I was going to do it, take a new snapshot, and then this is my vocal up. And I'd say proceed. And if I was going to do vocal up, you don't do a vocal up a cappella, but like a vocal up TV mix or something. I mean, I suppose
vocal up a cappella. That's great.
Yeah.
Really going above and beyond there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the way it hits the bus compression is just different, man. It just sounds totally different.
Yep. It's got a little more,
Yeah. So really, the only use case I have for a second snapshot is something like that, where I've got a vocal up and a vocal down. And typically, the way I do it is I would put the level that it is for the main mix in the comments, and then I would just turn up the VCAs and just be done with it. But whatever, I didn't bother writing it down, so let's pretend I'm putting it back there. But you don't have to remember where it was for either snapshot. Both snapshots know where the volume was. Absolutely. So let me just talk about the list real quick. So now it says best song ever is our session, and we've got 2 snapshots. And when I double click, I've got the main mix is one with 28 mixed passes, the vocal up, which has 1 mixed pass. Now, either one of these, I can drill down and see all my mixed passes, go back up a level, and I can drill down in this one and see the mixed passes. The other thing you can do when you're looking at individual mixed passes, when you double click, you can edit a little bit of information after the fact. If you're not positive you remembered to set it to the correct source, you can actually change the source because it remembers all of the valid sources for that snapshot. You don't have to have the session open for it to do that. It's all stored within the snapshot. And this is the kind of thing I forget to set sometimes. Because it's like, I'm not right-clicking the source to say bounce anymore. I'm just doing the app. So I will sometimes go through, make sure I'm doing that. Am I actually putting it on the correct track afterwards? Oh, I forgot to name this one. Or you can change where it's going to happen, where the bounce is going to happen and where the export is going to happen. And you can go case by case and do that. And in case as anyone is asking, yes, this works bouncing online or offline. It doesn't matter.
Did you just see the chat? Or
no.
you picked, wow, how timely. That just was asked in the chat.
Here, look,
Somebody
I'm
was
just going to
saying,
show you. I'm just going to show you this dialogue again. There's the offline online button is right there.
Yeah.
And again, when it goes orange to say, hey, maybe you might want to bounce online, but it's valid to do it offline. It's like you do whatever you want.
Yeah. So just to talk about that for a second. He was making the case, well, I really like to listen to the mixes. It's bouncing down. It's kind of that last error check. I've kind of detached a little bit. You can totally do that. Yeah. Right. And then also I might be crossing my wires here, but if you're doing a hybrid thing and using some outboard gear,
work fine.
You're still covered. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So there you go.
Yeah, absolutely. You can bounce offline just as easily as online. It's the same. Anything you can do from the bounce dialog plus a whole lot of other stuff, but any bounce that would be initiated from the bounce dialog can be done with the app. Because what it will do is set up your session and then use the bounce dialog to actually bounce it.
Yep.
So absolutely. And you can monitor them as you go because that's the way bouncing offline works.
Yeah. I think that we should make a quick point before you do, because we're getting into like some pretty deep feature stuff. Just a very quick point that this isn't just going to work on only one session, bounce all of the stuff from that one session, and then go do it again for another session. We haven't really made that point yet, and I feel like we should probably do a highlight here.
The way I work is I will mix an entire record at once. Sometimes you get a couple of songs or they need something really early, so you mix one song, whatever. But generally, I like to work on the entire record at once because stuff comes up and they start referencing songs to be other songs. Like, oh man, that thing you did to the guitar on that song, can we see if you can do something like that? Whatever. So then at the end of the project, I have to bounce everything. And this is where I was talking before about the 12 songs, 20 passes each. You're up at 240 mixed passes. I would need to mix, I need to bounce all of those at once. So the process would be exactly what I just did in this session. Then I close and save this session, open up the next song, do exactly the same thing. And this list will just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And when you go up to the top level, when it's grouped, you'll just have a line here for every session.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, I could do it, but I think you could take my word for that, right? Like
Yeah.
it's fine. And then
Yeah.
now that there are some snapshots in this list, you may have noticed at the beginning, these buttons were grayed out. Now that we have some snapshots, you can decide, well, okay, which of these snapshots are you going to bounce? So you can bounce whatever is selected in the list. So if I go back to ungrouped, I could say, well, I need to bounce these right now for some reason. Like, okay, bounce selected, or just a single one. That's fine. You can bounce session, whichever one is selected, it will bounce every single mix pass for that session, no matter how many snapshots it is. You could have 35 different snapshots. If you bounce with and without the limiter, you bounce 24-bit and 32-bit, you like whatever it is, you just keep taking snapshots for the same session over and over and over. When you click bounce session, it will organize them all and it will bounce them all. And let me point out the place on new track or placed on existing track. If you place on existing track, it doesn't place the first mix on that track, and now all of a sudden that track isn't named the same thing and now it can't find it. It waits until it's done with the whole session, and then it places all of them on the playlists. And I don't know, Mark, if you ever stuck around and watched it do it, it's actually kind of spooky. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Actually.
I mean, this is all pretty spooky. Actually,
yeah.
You know? Like,
but and also if you're bouncing different portions of the session, like if you're bouncing a whole set of bounces that are here, and then you get a whole set of bounces that are there, but you're placing them all on tracks, they will be placed at the time they were bounced on those playlists. The selection is always restored as it does that. If you have it placed on new tracks, the thing that bites most people is your default output for new tracks is something that hits the mix bus, right? Because of course it is, because there's nothing worse than making new tracks while you're mixing. Then you bounce the mix and they're not in it.
right.
But what it would mean is you bounce a mix, it immediately puts it on a new track, and now it's part of the next mix. The app is smart enough that it will set every new track as it makes it to no output, so that you won't start adding stuff. And that also will, in effect, deactivate the track to the point where it frees up resources. So all of your bounces will happen. The stuff will be there in the new tracks. All you got to do is select them all and assign them to an output, and you're fine, and you're done. Yeah. So the app is very smart about being able to do these things. The sessions that you're setting up snapshots for, if you're doing multiple songs, it can also be multiple projects. And there's no reason that these projects have to be at the same sample rate. And sometimes songs within an album are at different sample rates. You get them from different producers, and something's 48, something else is 88.2. You get one at 44.1 that they started in GarageBand on the phone, like whatever. The app, first of all, doesn't care. It's fine. It will open and close sessions, and Pro Tools will switch sample rates, but it will also sort the sessions by sample rate so that Pro Tools switches sample rates the least number of times possible to get through the batch. And there are two reasons for that. One is it's very slow to switch sample rates on certain playback engines.
I didn't know that you did this.
The other thing is that is when Pro Tools crashes the most, is switching sample rates on playback engines. Okay, let's talk a little bit about some other stuff that it takes care of, because I think this is important. It's easy. Well, it's not easy. It's difficult to write a script to bounce mixes, period. But it's also really difficult to foresee all of the problems that can happen. So if you're opening up a session that has missing audio, this will skip all and dismiss the dialogue. It's obviously not going to go searching for it, because if it doesn't find it, then you've got dialogues popping up while you're trying to bounce, and that's problematic. If you have inactive side chains, it will dismiss the dialogue. If you have missing plugins, it will dismiss the dialogue. Every single dialogue that can come up while you're opening a session, even if you have multiple ones, it will dismiss them. The only ones it doesn't deal with well are paste dialogues, because those come up in all kinds of different times and orders, and so there was no way to do that. So the only thing, and there's a whole best practices video which mentions this, like turn off notifications on your computer, because the script needs to be able to get to this clip menu You get 2 texts at the same time, this guy's covered up. It can't get to it. So there's some stuff to know about how to use the app and help it work, but it will work around just about anything that will come up. Let's say that you have defined a directory that is somewhere on the disk that you don't actually have permissions to. Like somehow you've decided, I'm going to bounce into my library folder. The app will actually check your write permissions as you make the snapshot to say, dude, that's not going to happen. If you've already got a file called what it is you said you wanted to bounce, like you've already bounced the main mix and you forgot to update the name of the mix to be main mix revision 1 or however it is that you differentiate, because they told you it was done, but now all of a sudden it's done again and you got to reprint, it will automatically rename the file as it bounces. It will keep track of it. And at the end of bouncing, instead of it just saying, ding, your bounces are ready, and I will always hear my wife's voice in my head when I see that dialogue now.
Version 2, you have to add it.
Yeah, it'll say your bounces have finished with warnings. And there's a button that'll open up the log file that just shows you like, hey, this one bounced, but it got renamed to this. Or let's say you went back in and worked on the session after you took the snapshot and you changed your print track to some other playlist because you were checking something. Well, at that point, it will search in playlists, actually. It's pretty good about finding the tracks, but there might be something screwy where it can't find the print track anymore. Mm-hmm. Then it will say, look, I printed and I exported, but I couldn't place it on the track. So you know everything that either got done but had to be renamed so it could get through it, or that didn't happen but didn't affect the fact that it bounced. It will continue as much as it possibly can to make sure that when you come back, your stuff's bounced. Yeah. It may not all be named what you said because something happened in the file system, or it might not have found a track or whatever, but your bounces will be there. In worst case, you just got to go rename some stuff. Mm-hmm. There are things that can happen, like let's say Pro Tools crashes. That happens sometimes. If Pro Tools crashes, I'm like halfway through writing the code for it to relaunch Pro Tools. That's version 2 for sure. I thought I was going to be able to sneak that into version 1, but the playlist thing killed me. So that's it. That'll be for version 2. Right now, what will happen is it will cancel and it will say that what you do, you'll get notifications as you bounce if you've got the notification feature. And you'll get a notification that says, hey, mix pass 47 out of 143 failed. And the process is now stopped. When a pass fails, the process is stopped. You'll also get a dialog on the screen that says, hey, the bounce has failed. Yeah. It'll be pretty obvious because Pro Tools isn't there anymore.
Okay, so to pause you, this thing sends you a text message when it's done, or it can send you an email.
Yeah.
We haven't actually said that yet.
We haven't gotten to that yet. I want to just cover one last thing before we go into the settings, because that is an important part of the settings. It's kind of a big deal. I didn't think it was going to be a big deal. Jonathan Wales was actually the one who said, dude, this thing's got to text you. Yeah. Because he's thinking about bouncing films where it takes an hour and a half to actually bounce each pass. Yeah. And he wants to know that that thing is still going.
Yeah, and I wanted to bring it up as a point to what you're saying about warnings and everything too. If you set this thing up to do 4 hours of bounces for yourself and you go out to pick up your dry cleaning or whatever, if that stops halfway through, you want to know about it, not, right now, so you can go back to the studio and keep it going, not come
but
back
also,
in 4 hours,
on the other hand, if you're still getting a text every 2.5 minutes, because you've already got the dry cleaning, you can go grab a beer.
Right.
Like it's still going.
Yeah.
So we'll get to, I just want to talk about one last thing out here on the list. Mm-hmm. Well, it's not one last thing because we haven't talked about stuff. You can rename the snapshot by just clicking the rename button. You can edit the snapshot, which is the same as double clicking and bringing up this dialog just to change the few things you can change. There are other things that you might wish you could change after the fact, but so many things are interrelated in the bounce process that these are the ones that are really, really safe to do. The online-offline box, I think I may add to this in a little dot update because I think that's safe to do. And that's the kind of thing you might not have remembered to check. And the last thing you want to do is go remake these because you forgot to see if it was right. And of course, if it's wrong, why wouldn't you be able to fix it now? So there might be a couple of extra things that sneak in here. Then you can delete selected or delete all to make the list, clean it up. And the other thing it does is, let's say you're bouncing a job. you say bounce all, and either something goes wrong, like Pro Tools crashes, or let's just say you get a phone call, you got to get back to work on this or on something else. While a mix is bouncing, if you hit cancel, the app knows that you've canceled the bounce. It'll say, hey, that file never showed up. We're all good. I'm going to cancel now. But every mix pass that has been bounced will get a little X in this B column for bounced. And if you haven't set it, when you say bounce all, you can say, well, do you want me to delete them right after I bounce, delete the snapshots, or do you want me to keep them? If you keep them, they will get a mark that they're bounced. You can then click this B and it will select all of the bounced ones, and then you can delete them. So you can pick up the job later on. So it doesn't have to be because something went wrong. It could just be that you need to get some work done and you need your computer back. You can import and export groups, whatever is in the list. If we export this, it will zip it all up into a file, put it anywhere you want on your computer. Then you can clear the list and go to another project. Let's say you've got multiple projects going. You want to set mixes up ahead of time, but you're not ready to print. You haven't gotten the final sign off. You can export them and then re-import them later. The other thing you could do is you could have multiple projects worth of snapshots laying around in the app because things are grouped. So you could just say, okay, I want that session, that session, that session, or, you know, which snapshots you want, or drill down and select different things across different projects and say, just bounce those now. And that will work. But you can import and export. And once you've got a lot, you can search, and you can either search by session or snapshot when you're in the ungrouped list. And let's say I just want to find all of my stems. You can search by the snapshot name and find all the stems, or you can search by a session name and just find everything for that session. So it's pretty easy to navigate this list because, as you can see, this list can get crazy long really, really fast. Okay, now let's talk about the settings. In here are the settings. So this is the thing I want to talk about the data structure of what's going on. So the Lord above of your data is how you save the session itself. You could go back to a session you've already made snapshots in and change everything. And if you don't tell the app to recall that information in the snapshot, then it will just leave it however you have the session set up. So if you change stuff in the session, it doesn't mean you have to remake all of your snapshots before you bounce. But the way this works is you've got this one set of data up here, which is the main tracks data. So this is like what you see in the import session data dialog. This is what is saved inside of the snapshot. Whatever you have selected here, whatever is enabled, and I'm going to disable everything except volume. Now, what's going to happen is it will open up the session. It will leave the session exactly how it is when it was saved, and then it will override the volume for each snapshot. That's what will allow me to print my vocal up versions. But let's say I changed a bunch of inserts. I even changed some sends. I switched to a different limiter on my mix bus. So I don't want to recall anything to do with I/O or inserts or sends or Atmos settings or groups or change your elastic audio, whatever you want to do. You can tell the app, don't override it. So you've got your saved session, then you get your snapshot, which will override anything in the session that you tell it to. Then you get what I call the extra tracks data, and this is what does all of the extra mix passes. So solo and mute, if you turn this off, it will go red down here to warn you, like, hey, you're not going to get your batch mix passes. Like all of that extra solo and mute pass, you can override me. That's fine, but it's probably not going to be what you want to do. The other thing here is the automation mode thing. So if you want to be recalling automation mode because you have turned it off on a couple of passes, that's fine. You'll notice in the tutorial videos, playlists was still something you could turn on and off. It turned out that the feature really works best. It will always recall playlists. So that's something, if you have changed, you can change the edits of the audio in the session all you want. But if you want different playlists to be active for the snapshots, the only way for this to work where it can be aware of snapshots at all is then you would have to remake your snapshots because it has to know what playlists things were on when you were going to print. And if your session has changed that, it's going to be problematic when it tries to change it again. So playlists will always be recalled. Now, if you just have tracks that aren't involved in any of these special types of bounce passes, you can change those playlists and it's fine. They won't get overridden because that will never get recalled by the snapshot. So it's only things like if you decide to make a clean edit 2 and that's the one you want to use, my advice would be to make clean original and then switch back to the clean and just make it right. Just leave the name the same and make your edits what they need to be, and then the snapshots are still valid. Okay, so that's what happens when you actually bounce each mix pass, is it looks to see, am I in part of a snapshot that we're already in the middle of, or am I a new snapshot that hasn't been bounced yet? If it's a new snapshot that hasn't been bounced yet, it will recall whatever of this data you have enabled, and then it will start bouncing all of the mix passes that go with that snapshot, soloing and muting and switching playlists and turning automation modes to whatever you had them set to, bouncing each one. Then it moves on to the next snapshot for that session. Then when it's done all the snapshots for the session, it will close that session, and then it will move on to the next session. While it's doing that, it can be iMessaging or SMSing you. And the only reason I've done this separately, I'll explain this in a second, or it can email you. The reason iMessage and SMS are different is because if you're going to iMessage, you have to be messaging an address that you already have an active conversation with. So if you've never texted yourself, then you're not going to be able to actually iMessage you. It's the way that AppleScript works behind the scenes, because I need to send these messages faceless. I can't have the app popping forward. So I can't say, give me the messages app, I'm going to type some stuff and then hit send. Like, that is not going to make things work. So in the background, it uses your iMessage program and it will send an iMessage to whatever address you put here if you choose iMessage. Otherwise, choose SMS and put any phone number you want in international format, and it'll text your mom if she needs to know that your mixes are done, like whatever. Or you can email, and again, it will just send faceless emails. And by faceless, I mean it's not going to bring the email program up to the front to whatever email address you put. And it will just say, mix pass, whatever number of whatever called this is done. And then it'll wait for the next one. And you set these just by clicking set, and it brings up a little dialog, and you put in your number. Then you can tell it, well, hold on, do you want to be notified? And I'll leave this back on iMessage. Do you want to be notified just at the end of the job? And this will tell you whether it completed or it failed. And hold on, I'm going to say no thanks because I'm going to talk about this in a second. Or you can say, message me after every single bounce pass. I thought that this would be really noisy, but there's a really cool thing about the way iMessage works when you message yourself, is it doesn't trigger lock screen notifications. So if you take your phone with you, you don't have to know how it's doing, but anytime you open up the Messages app, it'll tell you how it's doing by the messages already being in the conversation. So it's actually really cool. Okay, something you may have noticed right there is when I clicked on the alert, it said, hey, that's a paid feature, pal. What do you want to do? Do you want to purchase Pro, because that's part of the Pro feature set, or do you want to start a trial, or do you not want to bother? Do you just want to stay on the free thing? If you've already run your trial, obviously you can't start the trial again. Right now, the trial is 30 days, which is, I think, long enough that you can really see how this works into your flow. I'm going to say start trial, and it says, great, your trial will expire exactly 30 days from now, down to the 2nd. I say, okay. And then now it's going to tell me that it expires 27th of April, 2022 at that time. Okay. So now I can use all my Pro features. I'm not ready to talk about the different tiers and the pricing. We are absolutely going to get to that, because read the comments on anything and it's all about that. So we will get to that. So right now I'm set up to iMessage, and what I'm going to do, just because, is I'm going to pop this off the screen and I'm going to put in my phone number, because you know, you guys don't need to know my phone number as much as you'd like to send me love texts.
Andrew, quick question for you.
Yep.
What's your phone number?
Good one, Mark.
Wah, wah.
Wah, wah. All right. Okay, so I'm going to close that. Okay, so now it's set up to message me. So what I thought we should actually do is I should have it message me, right? Let me just like bounce some stuff so you can see it do it. Because it's one thing to talk about it, and it's another thing to actually have it do it. So let me find the conversation myself. I'm just going to start it off. So I'm going to say bounce all, because why not? So bounce all, sorry, brought up a dialog over here that says, do I want to keep or delete? I'm going to say keep, because what I'll do is I'll cancel it a little way in. Say keep, and now here we go. We get another progress dialog, but it has a little bit more information. We're bouncing mix pass 1 of 29, and it's starting with the best song ever vocal up. I think I actually turned off the importing the volume information, so this won't be correct, but it's because I explicitly just turned it off when I set up the bounce here. Okay, it's restoring all kinds of stuff. And you won't really be able to tell that it's done it because it would only be restoring the volume. But now we're printing vocal up, and that's a really fast mix because it's only a second long. That's good. Now we're doing 2 of 29. So this is going to be a stem, right? Verse, vox, low, harm. Oh, and here, I'll show you on my phone that bounce pass. I don't know if you can see that, but bounce pass 1 of blah, blah, blah has completed. And I'll just hold it up here, and it's about to start bouncing the next bounce pass. And that's done. And it's going to pop it in the clip list for now. And there's my next thing. So those are just going to keep coming up on my phone while this bounces. It's still, I have to admit, I actually do sit and watch it bounce sometimes because I still can't quite believe that it works. Yeah. So this is what it does while you go pick up your dry cleaning. If you're like Mark and you have dry cleaning, I'm trying to remember the last time I had dry cleaning.
I know. Yeah. After I said it, I was like, I don't do dry cleaning. I barely have time to wash my clothes.
No, especially with Vince, man. You're not little kids.
Yeah.
You're not cleaning.
You're not even cleaning your own laundry when you have kids. It's insane.
No, exactly.
Which brings up a really good point. We can come back to it when we talk about all the things that you can do while this is doing it. But
yeah,
I get to spend more time with my kid because of this.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, even if you're not going to leave the house, like I do it overnight all the time. If I'm bouncing stems and it's 300 passes or something like that across a record, and because I use a lot of UAD stuff, I mean, I'm lucky if I'm bouncing at sort of 1.5 times real time usually. So 5-minute song is going to bounce in like 3 minutes and something. 400 passes, that's still more minutes than there are in a night, but it'll do it. And I can just wake up in the morning and hit cancel, and there you go. So I should probably cancel this. I kind of want it to do the playlist thing.
Why don't we just do a couple questions? We can do some talking.
Yeah, let's do some questions while this is bouncing. You can make us a little bit bigger.
It's going fast enough. I'll make us a little bit bigger, but I think it's kind of fun to have that thing.
Yeah, it is. It is fun. Yeah. It's crazy that it works.
I'm telling you,
I shouldn't say that, should I?
All right. So I really want to talk about all the time saving benefit stuff because I love that. But let's do a couple questions first, and I think we'll end up going there.
Absolutely.
Pensado's Place says it's crazy to see the Bounce Factory robots take control and do everything automatically. It is.
Yeah, it is. It really is. Yeah, that's not a question, so I won't answer it.
Ken Cordes just asked in the chat, does it do online bounces? And the answer is yes, it will do online bounces.
Absolutely. Yep.
Bob Holbrook says it's voodoo. I agree.
It's coded voodoo, but yes, it is voodoo.
Yeah. Okay, so let's do a couple. Kenneth Wright says, what doesn't it do? Okay.
Well, it doesn't poop rainbows. We've learned that.
Yeah. It doesn't actually pick up the dry cleaning you have to do there.
No, God, I love that bear. I really, really do. And the best part is I didn't even notice the first 2 or 3 times. The bear is actually pooping.
Right.
Like it's got that look on its face because it's pooping, but it's not raining.
I noticed that the first time.
Did you? All right. It took me a couple of times.
Okay, let's
and notice, by the way, that these tracks are soloing because it's going through all the background vocal stems. So it does actually do the stuff. You're not getting 29 of the same mix.
Yeah. So over in Crowdcast, kind of similar to the online offline question, David K asks, will it work with hybrid and outboard gear? And
Yep.
will it work in the analog world with the desk to manage?
Yeah, it will. Now, obviously, if you're using an SSL or something like that, and you like to solo on the desk to cut your noise floor down and stuff, it's not going to be able to solo on an SSL. But that said, something like the Sigma, you can actually control solos and mutes with MIDI. So you could set up MIDI tracks in your session that were soloed and muted by this, and that would control the Sigma. So if you can control the solos and mutes of an external device using MIDI tracks within Pro Tools, then you absolutely could control that as part of the mix pass, because it will just do exactly what I've showed you with any track in any session, and it will bounce in real time, and that means all of your hardware inserts will be live. So, and you can select as a bounce source an input, like whatever a valid source is that you could bounce normally, you can bounce using the app. Absolutely. It's the easiest way to think of it is if you could bounce your mix with the bounce mix dialog, then you can bounce it with the app and get all of the extra features of exporting afterwards, putting on playlists, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Awesome. My brain just went to, wait, so if you can send off MIDI stuff, what else could you automate while it's bouncing?
Yeah, I mean, you know,
I'm gonna pass.
whatever
Yeah.
whatever you can control by muting and soloing tracks in a session, you can control. Period.
Yeah. Marcos Gomes asks, does it export the final mix or master at the same time as stems and at the same time effects off or a second version against the final master? So the answer is yes.
Yeah, it will bounce whatever you set up. So let me just reiterate. So the snapshot, it's like a save as of the session. But when you bounce, you say, well, how much of that stuff do you want me to recall? So if you want to bounce versions that have the mix bus processing and versions that don't, you could do one of two things. You could do a snapshot that has all of the plugins on your mix bus bypassed and set up all the mix passes that way. Or you could bounce two sources at once, one that's the input to your mix bus processing and one that's the output of your mix bus processing. And then it would bounce both at exactly the same time.
Mhm.
And it would do it the same way Pro Tools does it, where it would use the mix pass name and then it would be dot whatever the source was. So you just name that no effects with effects, whatever you name it, and then it will bounce it. It'll bounce the multiple sources exactly the same way that Pro Tools will. But if you would rather just bypass the limiter and you don't want to set up all this weird complex routing, just do another snapshot with a limiter bypassed, set up your mix passes, and it'll bounce those.
Awesome.
And I think that the thing to keep in mind is because it'll bounce them while you don't have to be there, if it's actually less messy in terms of the session to bounce one source at a time, but have it bounce twice as many mix passes because you're only bouncing one at a time instead of two, fine. You're not in the room.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter. It's why I don't mind making extensive stems like this.
Yeah. All right, we'll talk about some use cases in a minute here. Funk Gets Stronger would like to know if it can read your emails and then make the revisions and then bounce it.
No.
We found something it can't do. Okay.
Yeah. But then again, if you use offset counter or you use mix-up or
yeah.
You know, there's stuff that'll help you with that.
Right.
This is just helps you bounce it when you got to bounce it.
Right. Yeah.
And it's also, I mean, it's not just for bouncing like multiple versions of one song, or like we've said, multiple versions of multiple songs. When I'm ready to send the first pass of a record, I will go through and set up just the reference mix. It's one pass per session, but it's across 12 or 14 sessions. I set them all up and then I say go and I go eat dinner.
Right.
And it opens and closes the sessions and bounces them all for me.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get you and Guillaume and Christian in a room and figure out how to do the automatic revisions thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, see, the thing is, if that happens, we're all out of a job. All right.
Only revisions. That's it. Only revisions.
Yeah.
If you guys go beyond that, we're gonna cut it off.
Yeah.
Okay. Kenneth Wright asks, can you bounce to another computer other than your Pro Tools computer? will Bounce Factory work via screen sharing, remote desktop, etc.? So 2 questions in there. Let's talk about bouncing to another computer.
Well, let me understand how you would bounce to another computer. If you're using satellite to do it, then yes, absolutely. Because if you could use the bounce dialog to do it, it'll do it. And I'm trying to remember about recording with satellite to other systems. I don't remember how that works. I think if you're running it on the record machine, then absolutely.
Mhm.
So that's the key. You would be running it on the machine you're bouncing to,
Mhm.
because it's the thing that actually has to bounce. Obviously, if you're bouncing offline, you can't bounce live inputs. Like there are restrictions, but that's just Pro Tools restrictions. It's not
Right.
this. If you can set up a bounce pass in the bounce dialog, then you can absolutely have the app automated. No question. The remote desktop stuff, like, yeah, you could absolutely log in. I've actually done that. I've been
Mhm.
sitting downstairs with my laptop and like something went wrong, and I've logged in with, I use like the Chrome remote desktop thing. Logged in and like, what the hell happened? Oh shit, Pro Tools crashed. And I'll just relaunch Pro Tools and start it up again and do that remotely. So yeah, there's no
Yeah.
reason you can't do it. You can't set it up on one machine to have it run a separate machine.
Mhm.
That's just not, yeah, that would be too messy.
Right.
And there's some best practices things, like you want to set up the snapshots on the machine you're actually going to bounce them on. It might seem like, oh, that'll be great. I'll set them all up on my main rig, and then I'll have a second rig in the corner. Set them up on the rig in the corner. Only
Yeah.
because paths change as you move drives from computer to computer. It will work because there's supposed to be relative paths, and they all start with /volumes if you're doing it all on external disks. So as long as you move it over,
Mhm.
but things can get messy and you're asking for stuff to go wrong. But it doesn't take any longer to set them up on the one in the corner than it does on the mix rig. And then if you get to the point where you can have somebody else set them up, now you can actually
Mhm.
work on your main rig while someone else sets them up.
Yeah.
So the multi-computer thing can absolutely happen, but you just have to know how stuff works, to know what will work and what won't.
Yeah. All right. Well, we got 4 mixes left before, I think,
I'm
is that
just gonna,
25? Yeah.
I am full
There you
of
go. Blowing up your phone.
blowing up my phone.
Okay. Stevie 8 says, darn Andrew, you're putting me out of a job to ever be your personal mixdown assistant. This damn booty bounce app.
Yeah, well, see, that's the thing, is my studio is in my house and we've had a plague.
Mhm.
So even if I had an assistant, they would not have been allowed in the house for the last 2.5 years. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And look, I think that there's some people like, well, this is, it's taking the place of an assistant. It isn't. I mean, look, maybe there's some people who are like right on the edge of hiring an assistant, and now they would be able to handle this stuff themselves. Then that's fantastic.
Mhm.
But for me, what it would do is it would free up an assistant to actually do useful stuff. Like, this
Bingo.
isn't useful.
Right.
It can be done by a machine. So let's let the machine do it.
Yep.
There's nothing productive about having a human being sit in front of the same dialogue for 7 hours printing mixes.
Yeah. And you don't care if your assistant uses this versus, sitting there and doing it himself. In fact, you would want him to do this so he can go do other stuff in the studio that's
Exactly.
more valuable to you.
And I would argue that my bouncing is much more correct and precise, and I make many fewer mistakes. So it isn't just the time saving, though. Obviously, the time saving is the biggest thing.
Right.
Having this happen while I sleep is just life changing. But it is the ability to concentrate while you set it up. So in an hour, you've set up all the mix passes for a record, and they're all right. You're
Right.
not screwing stuff up. So that's a really big deal. And I think that if you have an assistant do it, well, now the assistant can be doing other stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now the bounces will get done and the live room will be clean.
Yeah.
It'll be great.
Yeah. And the cats will be fed and they won't
Yeah.
be quite as angry with me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ooh, 29 to 29.
There we go. So what are we going to see here?
I got to make the sound at the end.
Get Debbie quick.
Get Debbie, get Debbie. Oh, but hold on. It's going to do the playlist thing.
Right?
Okay. It's doing the playlist thing. It's doing the playlist thing.
Let me go
Unfortunately,
full
there's
screen
no audio
on
on
this.
most of these bounces.
Right.
So you can't tell, but it is actually copying the bounces we just made. Yeah, I'm bouncing all these background vocals in a spot in the song where there are no background vocals.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a mistake. that's pretty stupid.
It's not the app's fault. Leave the robot alone.
Exactly. The robot did this just fine.
Yeah.
So, and this shows you, I don't want to like, oh, I'm so clever, but obviously you need to do this all at once at the end, because otherwise that track doesn't exist later on, and you don't want to have to keep track of playlists that are changing names during the process. So it does this. And the other reason it does it at the end is because if for some reason something goes really wrong while it's doing this, all of your stuff is already bounced and exported, which is important. Because that's what's really important. It's much easier for you to chuck stuff on playlists than it is for you to come back after hoping that something bounced all your mixes and have to bounce all your mixes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the idea behind doing this last. And then if we had another session, as soon as it's done placing these on the list, it would just close the session, save it, because obviously otherwise the stuff wouldn't be in the session anymore. And then it would open up the next one.
Yeah. And these files all went to whatever directory you told it to.
Yep.
Awesome. So is this a good time to talk about a use case that I did?
Yeah, what you got?
Yeah. So as I had the incredible privilege of getting to use this thing early on.
Yeah.
And
by the way, I said someone else's name. Adam Hawkins was the other tester. I think I said Adam Franklin, who is a fantastic musician and in one of my favorite bands, Swerve Driver, but he did not beta test this app. Adam Hawkins did. So I just want to clear that up. Sorry.
Yeah, who does a lot of stem bouncing. So
yes.
Yeah.
It changed his life immediately. He was a very happy man.
Yeah. So I had when I first got this to try out, I had a record going on from a loop artist, and the loop artist wanted all the regular stem stuff except for TV and instrumental, because some of the songs didn't have vocals. But anyway, he wanted to have every single track sent back to him with all of my processing on it so that he could bring those things back into Ableton.
Wait. Bing.
Oh,
your mixes are ready.
There it is.
That's not good. Debbie's sexy. I'm creepy. And real quick, you notice these all have the little bounced indicator, so I can just go ahead and click on them, and now they're all selected, and I could say delete selected, and now we're cleaned up.
Yeah.
Point.
Awesome. Okay, so yeah, the loop artist wanted a file of every single track with processing on it so he could bring it into Ableton and then make his own arrangements and still have a better sound than what it came to me as. And some of those songs had 96 tracks going on them, and my answer probably would have been I'm sorry, no, or I would have done like a commit all tracks and found some kind of compromise or something like that. But because I had this thing, I set it up, and over 3 different nights, because there were a ridiculous amount of passes.
You want to hide my screen for a sec? Just
get
sure. Feedback here, and I'll
yeah. So over the course of 3 different nights, I had Bounce Factory just basically do all of that for me. And I did, I kind of told him in the beginning of it, I was like, let me get back to you. I'll see what I can do about that. And I wound up sending him a giant Dropbox folder later, and he freaked out, and he was like, holy crap, I didn't think that you were actually going to say yes. So yeah, that's pretty cool.
And it doesn't mean that you can't charge for stems anymore either. I mean,
right.
I think it's like, if you're lucky enough to be able to charge for stems, you're still delivering the same thing. And it doesn't matter that you haven't had to ruin your life to do them. You're still doing them. It still takes up resources. It takes time on the computer, all of that. I think it's still very valid. But considering what most people will pay for stems, it's actually almost cost effective to do them now, as opposed to if you're mixing a song for $500, they're not going to give you 300 to give them 30 stems.
Right.
But that's what you should get paid for it. But you're never going to get it. But if they can say, like, man, I'll give you $50, like, well, I can set up those 30 stems in about 2 minutes, and then it'll print while I sleep. Like, okay, that's fine.
Yeah. And vice versa. If you really want to blow somebody away, you could, make a pretty big impact without having to put a lot of effort in too. So, but yeah, I think you should charge for it.
So we're going to have to talk pricing, but do we have other questions first? Because we definitely have to talk that, because everybody gets really angry.
Yeah, let's see if there's anything.
Let's say any nice questions, and before we talk about pricing.
Just before we get all dark here. I'm just kidding now. Let's see. Gosh, somebody, I shouldn't say this, but Mix by Rob says it has to rate the mixes too, so it can send you a message. Your bounces are ready, but your mix sucks.
Yeah, exactly. Like the old SSL little thing. Like that mix sounded great, Andrew.
Right. Thank you, SSL. Okay, so here's a question we could talk about if you're comfortable with it. Dell mixed it. What makes this different from Bounce Butler?
Well, okay. To be fair, I have not used Bounce Butler. I know about it because Mark, you used to use it. I know some people who have used it. I have not used it. From what I'm aware of, it will open sessions like this one will, but you have to save a session how you want to bounce it, which is fine. I mean, that's like taking a snapshot. But if you want to do those 30 stems, you would save 30 sessions. And it would open up each one of those sessions, and then it would bounce that stem because you would have saved the session with the track soloed. You would have gone into the bounce dialog, named it what you wanted, though I think you can change that name, as you set the thing up. Like all that stuff can happen. Hold on. Squid's at the window. This is important. Let me let Squid in.
Yes.
Sorry, guys. But, cats.
Squid calls.
Get in here. Don't just hang out. Now Squid's going to run to cat food and then get really angry and come back because there's so much cat food that he just doesn't want to eat it. Okay. Where was I?
So Bounce Factory saving.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So as far as I understand it, if you wanted to print 30 stems, you would save 30 sessions. It will open up each one of those sessions and it will bounce the file. And it will put it, I'm assuming, wherever you leave the bounce dialog set up. So like this, but what it would be like in a way is if you had to, like I talked about the early version of this, where you had to do a snapshot for every single mix pass. So you'd take a snapshot, call it the name that you were going to call it, solo the track, say proceed. Then take snapshot, solo the next track, name it what you want to name it. There's no automatic naming. There's none of that stuff in it. But then at the end, you don't have all of the stuff in one session. You would have to compile everything back into the session if you like. And I hate having mixes not in the session. That's really weird to me that I can't go back 5 years from now, open up a session, and everything is there. And I can listen to the mix and I don't have to go find it because I was printing into another folder and all that kind of stuff. And it won't put stuff on playlists, obviously, because that's a feature I made up. So I don't think it does any of that. I don't know enough about the rest of the way it works to say what the differences are. But I think what it is really is that this does all of the save asing within the app. The app knows what all your settings are, and it's just up to you how much of the saved session settings do you want to overwrite. So even like the simple case of the vocal up mix, there's no reason to save a session just because you've changed the volume level on 2 VCAs. It's so easy to document it in the comments, but also you can just, the way the app works is the standard mix pass always goes last. So most likely it's going to put the session back exactly how you had it when you took the snapshot anyway. And in a dot release, what I'm planning on doing is allowing you to mark a snapshot as the master snapshot, so that one will always get bounced last. Right now, it might not be bounced last, so in this case, it might have left the session with the vocal ups. But I think it would be cool if you could say, like, hey, this is the session I want it to be left as. But if you're doing something extensive and there are a lot of changes, then go ahead and do a save as and just do snapshots for that session. And then you'll only have 2 sessions that have mixes in them. So I think the main difference with Bounce Butler is just how it works within single Pro Tools sessions and can actually change stuff within the sessions.
Yeah.
Past that, I don't know. There may be plenty of other stuff. I don't think there's anything it does that I can't do that I don't know about, but you would tell me, I don't know. But I haven't used it.
Yeah, and another thing too, and somebody asked if this is for Pro Tools only earlier. That would be a difference.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. He's written it to deal with. I think he's got Cubase and Ableton and Logic.
Logic.
Right? Yeah. Tools, so this is Pro Tools only, and it's Mac only, and it runs on top of SoundFlow, which is Mac only. So
Mhm.
that's the deal. Now, if SoundFlow shows up on Windows, I don't see any reason why this can't be ported to Windows. But right now it runs on SoundFlow. So that's the deal with it. I think that, there's obviously a pretty robust Windows community running Pro Tools, and I'm sorry.
Yeah.
There's nothing I can do about it. I've written it in SoundFlow. I don't think that, writing a standalone app from scratch that could do this would be the equivalent of writing the feature into Pro Tools itself. And that is a gigantic undertaking that takes up a lot of resources. And I managed to, because of how amazing the platform and the support is on SoundFlow, I wrote this myself.
Mhm.
I was able to do it. So the limitation is Pro Tools only, Mac only.
Mhm. Awesome. All right, let's see what else we got. We'll come back to this later. Let's do pricing.
Okay, let's talk about pricing. Okay, it is a subscription product. Now, that's going to make some people angry. I know that. It made me angry at first that SoundFlow was a subscription product, but then I started using it and saw the level of support and how often it was updated, and it's like, okay, that makes perfect sense to me. And I think it's getting harder and harder to make an argument for a single payment for any software product. The life cycle and the update cycle it's constant.
Mhm.
Like, while this app was being written, Pro Tools completely changed the bounce dialog. Completely. Does everyone
Right.
remember that? The old bounce dialog and now the new bounce dialog. I had to completely rewrite the bounce dialog portions of the app. Monterey came out, and it's now different to navigate two folders. So when I'm saying I want to export a mix and I have to choose the directory, I had to completely rewrite that bit of code to check if you're on Monterey. I have to check what version of Pro Tools you're on. The other thing is that I've been beta testing Pro Tools since the betas used to show up on floppies. That was like the best day ever when you got
That's
the new
amazing.
Pro Tools beta on
Beta.
a floppy. Fucking awesome. But
is.
what it means is that I have day zero support for the new versions of Pro Tools.
Yeah.
Anything that they do, updating, like they've been updating some of the options for ADM bouncing and stuff like that. Because I'm working in these versions and I'm using this app all the time, it will always be compatible with the new version of Pro Tools the day it comes out.
Right.
Unless they really hose me and change something up at the very last minute. And SoundFlow is the same way. It is updated so that it almost always works with the latest version of Pro Tools and the latest OSs. I mean, Christian had Rosetta support going in like almost no time. It was kind of spooky. So he had Monterey and Rosetta going long before I could catch up with that. But then I fixed the Monterey bug and things like that. The other thing is, forgetting about just keeping up with features, the ongoing development. There are really weird corner case bugs. Like, Mark, you found one of the craziest bugs I've ever seen in my life. So I use import session data for some of the Snapshot engine. And if you import session data from a session that has frozen tracks, it says, hey, if I import these, I have to replace your main playlist, which, of course, to me, that's like a Pro Tools bug. That's a kind of a weird functionality that it does that. But that's the last thing in the world you want to do, because now you're screwing with the session in ways that you're not supposed to. And if the track is frozen, then you're not changing plugins or sends or whatever. So I know I don't need to do anything. So I've wrote code that will deselect those tracks as it's importing the data. Then you were bouncing a mix and it wasn't working. And like, what the hell is going on? And it turned out you were bouncing a mix where the producer was using the track name for comments. So every track name was like a full paragraph. And the way the names were being abbreviated in the import session data dialog made it impossible to tell what track was what. And so I think I managed to, that was a tough one, but I think I sorted that out. Like by the next night, I'd figured out, like, I think I worked until about 2 a.m, couldn't figure it out, went to sleep and woke up with the oh, I'm an idiot. I can do it that way and fix the bug and send it to you. So
Mhm.
this kind of development, and it's not just because I know Mark. There was somebody earlier today after it was available in the SoundFlow store who was trying it. And he's like, dude, I can't make a snapshot. I'm getting an error every time. So I
Mhm.
had him send me the logs, and I looked, and it was because his Pro Tools settings folder was in his iCloud drive. And iCloud, when you ask it, hey, where is that file on the disk? It lies to you. And it says, I'm on
Right.
a hard disk called iCloud Drive. No, it isn't. It's in a folder inside your library folder. It's like buried, absolutely buried on your
Yeah.
computer. And I had to like Google this and how do I do that? And how do I get the username? Because I've got to rebuild the path from scratch. But I've managed to fix the bug, and now this user can use the app. So that sort of development is happening all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, the number of revisions, I think I was up to, it was 126 plus 20. So it's like over 150 revisions once we started beta testing to fix
Right.
bugs. And as this gets out into the wider world, there will be workflows that have things I have not thought of, and there will be bugs, and I will fix them. So the
Mhm.
development is constant. So that's the idea behind it being a subscription. The other reason for it being a subscription is if you think about, well, all right, you're just going to buy it once. Well, what's this app worth? Well, if you're in post, there are programs, standalone programs that do less than this, but like conform playlists or stuff like
Mhm.
that, conform EDLs that cost thousands and thousands of dollars.
Mhm.
No music mixer is going to pay thousands and thousands of dollars for anything
Right.
that does a bit of
Right.
stuff. So it was almost impossible to just come up with a price. So, but mostly because of the ongoing development, I thought subscription makes the most sense. One of the benefits of it being a subscription is there are two options when you subscribe. You can subscribe monthly or you can subscribe annually. If you subscribe annually, you only pay for 10 months, you get 2 months free, which is, standard, you get a bit of a discount. But I thought 2 months free, that's cool.
Mhm.
That's whatever percentage that is of, it's 1/6. I don't know what the hell that is. 13% discount, something like that. Okay. I did that math. It's something like that. Whatever.
Yeah, you just built this app. You can do the math.
Yeah, it's not in my head. I write code to do shit like that.
Right.
So, but the point of keeping the monthly one was that, let's say you, like, if I'm working on an album, I'm working on 14 songs. It could take me a while. And if I've got 3 projects going and I'm in the middle of all 3 of them, it might be more than a month until
Mhm.
I need to print stuff. In which case, you can cancel the subscription. So you can buy it for a month and then cancel. And at the end of the month, you'll stop paying. And then the next time you need to bounce a bunch of stuff, buy it for a month.
Yeah.
So that's why there are annual and monthly, and that's why it is a subscription. And then there are, well, technically there are 3 tiers to the app. And actually, we haven't even talked about the free bonus app you get with this, which I don't even know if you've messed with, Mark, but
I
I'll show you this in a
I
minute.
know a little bit about, yeah.
It's
Um,
okay. Go
before
ahead.
you go to tiers,
Yeah.
I think,
Before I put everybody in tears. Yeah.
well, maybe you're going where I'm gonna try and drive it, but it's just about who's this app for, I think.
This app is for anybody who hates bouncing mixes. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
for anybody who wishes they had the time back that they spend bouncing mixes. Now, whether that's a quality of life thing, or it's an hourly charge thing, or it's you paying somebody who's way overqualified to keep setting up the bounce dialog and hitting OK,
Yep.
whatever. Or maybe you can work on your own if you don't have to take the time away, or you could just take on more mixing project, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And the pricing, I think, reflects that in different ways. So
Mhm.
it's for people who make records, but I think there are applications in the post world. It just depends what your setup is. I think for the really complicated multi-machine setups, it might not be. But I think for the crazy deliverables stuff that happens now,
Mhm.
there are use cases, because if you've printed, let's say you're doing like a big film mix for Netflix, and it's a 3-machine source and a recorder machine. Obviously, getting everything onto the recorder, you're using track punch, you're doing things that this app does not do. That's not the way you record.
Right.
Once everything's in the recorder, you now have to bounce 500 versions of that session. You've got to do all the foreign language stuff. You got to do M&Es. You got to do all of that. That all involves soloing, muting, changing playlists. depending on how you have it set up. If that's the way you set it up, then this app can do that. And those mixes would bounce crazy fast because there's no processing. So you could set that up. You could save a lot of that stuff in the presets in the dialog, and presumably it would save you a lot of time. So if you use the bounce mix dialog, this app could be for you. Now, I am not going to pretend like you couldn't work without it. Obviously, everybody who's watching this has worked without it except me and you, because we've had it.
Right.
Now that I've been using it, it bums me out so much if I can't use it. And like I can't remember, there was some reason why for a couple of days, like I'd broken something severely and I couldn't use it. And like, and it was killing me because of not only just the time saving, but the mental freedom of not having to sit there setting up each mix. I can't stress enough how horrible that is. And if you're used to doing it, you may not realize how horrible, or maybe you're the kind of person it doesn't bother. I don't know. Maybe I'm weird, but it's one of the worst things in the world because I'm always doing it until 3 a.m. because I don't want to waste good productive time doing it. And I got to get it done.
Right.
It's the worst. So that's what it's for. Okay. So the tiers for it, when you get the app, it's free. As soon as you saw what I did to activate the trial, when you activate it, that's the pro version. So that's all of the functionality that I've showed you. And that, if you buy it, is $49 a month, which is priced basically almost, it's like the same as the competition. Like, and if someone says, like, it's one of the things that's really weird is a lot of the comments that will talk about the pricing, and I completely understand it. When you haven't used something and you don't see how it can impact your life, and some people may decide, like, I don't need it. Well, that's absolutely fine, in which case it costs you $0. But if it's something that you really use and you realize what sort of time it's saving, I think the idea of your time is worth $50 an hour, $25 an hour, that's 1 or 2 hours a month. You're paying an assistant $12.50 an hour, that's 4 hours a month. You're going to save 4 hours a month if you print mixes. If you don't, then you don't need the app, and that's totally cool. Okay.
Yeah.
So let me talk about what the tiers are, because I haven't yet. So there's the free tier, which lets you take all the snapshots that I've just shown you, but you can only bounce one snapshot at a time. So it's just to check out the app if your trial has already run out for some reason. So the bouncing part of it is very restricted, but the snapshot part isn't, so you can kind of see how it works and mess around with it. That said, you've got 30 days of it full featured, so that should be enough time. But I didn't want it to like completely stop working because the other thing is, let's say you've got 2 or 3 projects going and you want to set them all up and bounce them all at once, but you just want to pay for 1 month. You could set up a project to bounce before subscribing for a month. And then when you're sure that all 3 projects are going to print within that month, fine. Do the subscription. You can bounce that first project. You're ready to go. So that's the free tier. The next tier obviously allows you to set up all your mix passes, but you can bounce 1 session at a time. Not 1 snapshot at a time, 1 session. So if you've got 30 snapshots, each of which has 10 mix passes for some reason, for a session, you could bounce all of those mix passes in 1 job, and that would be that. It will not message you, and it will not open and close sessions. It'll actually open sessions, because if you have a different session open when you say bounce that session, it'll go ahead and open it because the app does that. But it'll bounce 1 session at a time.
Yeah.
So if you want it to be able to bounce multiple sessions at a time and you want to add the messaging to the app, that's the pro tier, and that's $49 a month. And that number comes from what I just talked about with the time savings and what your time is worth, and also comes from what the competition costs. I mean, it's very difficult, and there are lots and lots of articles on the web about how to price software as a service, because it's the kind of thing that pisses people off. But if you look at the trend in software just in our industry, Pro Tools used to be all perpetual license. Now it's almost no perpetual license. Same with the plugin companies. Most plugin companies are perpetual license. Even Waves, which is like the Waves update plan, but it's a perpetual license. But the update plan is your subscription. That's what you do. Obviously, Slate, like all of the bigger companies are doing that. And it's just because there's so much ongoing development. It's the only thing that makes sense. The difference is with some things, when you stop paying, you just don't get updates anymore, but it'll still work. It like freezes your computer in time. The problem with that here is that I'm relying on a platform that is also being updated all the time.
Yeah.
And I can't freeze functionality in a way like, oh, well, you won't get whatever the update is. Like, okay, the next update will be that it knows when Pro Tools crashes and will relaunch it. So you won't get that, but you'll still have the other version. Like, no, that's the pro version, and the pro version is going to keep getting better. And I'm also very open to input to support different workflows. There could be custom versions of this built for people who've really got something different going on. There's no reason this can't be shaped by the users. And I absolutely want feedback on this. But the only thing that made sense was to be a subscription, and those prices just made sense for the time saved and also for what it costs out there to have anything else do it. Now, that said, if you're a geek like me, get SoundFlow and write scripts to bounce your mixes for you. There's no reason you can't do it. And there's some people who said, look, man, I already wrote a script to bounce my mixes. Well, then you don't need this, and that's fine.
Right.
I'm not going to pretend like somehow you're going to do worse work if you don't have this. The other thing you've got to keep in mind is there are lots of tools that make it easier to do your job while you're doing your job. And then this tool does your job so you don't have to do your job. Like it's actually doing the work completely unattended. So it is a different kind of class of thing. And I know there's going to be lots of pushback and lots of people who are not into the subscription model and not into the pricing the way it is, but it's the only thing that makes sense so that this can live in the real world. Because if you can imagine, I had a second full-time job programming this thing. I now am going to have a third full-time job doing customer service. Just people who haven't watched the videos and don't understand you select the tracks, not soloing them, and why are all my mix passes the same? And like, there's going to be a lot of support that goes into this as well. And it is just me. I don't have like a team of people writing code and I'm the face of it. And this isn't being done by another company and I'm sponsoring it. Like, I wrote the damn thing. So anyway, I'm going to shut up because I can talk in circles about
well,
this.
I'm going to just
about the pricing.
continue on.
Keep asking.
Yeah, I'm going to continue on what you just said. You not doing the subscription price would be kind of akin to a band coming back to you in 10 years and saying, hey, you know, Atmos is the thing now. And for us to keep doing well with that product that you made before, we need the Atmos mix. So send that to us when you can for free, you know?
Yeah, which isn't that far off of the economics of mixing an app. No, that's not true. It's gotten much better. But yeah, I mean, look,
it's, I mean, that's kind of the whole thing. It's we're, you know, it's got to cover your time to keep working on it and keep it working on our new computers.
And I hope that
fast.
the thing I will say over and over and over is get the demo, get the demo, get the demo, get the demo. You've got the whole thing for free for a month. And I've had a few different people say a month is a long time to give it for free. And if you look at studies, it's actually not ideal. Like 2 weeks is better because people get excited. And then people who may not actually want it long term will go ahead and subscribe. But I wanted to give people a month because I wanted to make sure you had time to understand it and then to really use it. And if you get to the end of that month and it's like, man, $50 that, or $20, no, it's not worth it. Totally cool. Like, you know, I'm not going to be offended if this doesn't work for you. That's like saying my plugin doesn't work for you or you don't like my mix. That's fine. I'll cry, but you know.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Like, I think it's been covered now, and you just told people the ways to use the app for the cheapest, as well as I wrote this by learning SoundFlow really well and asking questions on the forum. You're also on the forum. You've helped out me and people with scripts, and you know, so there's workarounds if the price really hits you the wrong way.
Yeah, and look, there's some apps. There's a lot of stuff I put up there for free, like all the Melodyne prep helper stuff and all that. There are a couple of much cheaper paid apps like the color deck and transport deck and the track selector and stuff, and those make sense because those don't require the same crazy ongoing development. But this is 16,000 lines of code, and it does a lot of stuff, and all of it can need tweaking, and it's a big thing.
Yeah.
And it's what made sense.
There was a comment in the chat that I want to address really quick. And that was somebody saying, oh, this is one Pro Tools only as part of it, and they were saying, why does Puremix think that this is relevant to all of the members to let them know about? So I want to do a little bit of a like random testimonial thing, and not to turn it into an infomercial here, but in the past, 2 years, we've had Mixup come out. We've had, which like I didn't code Mixup. I work for Puremix. I use Mixup all the time, but I didn't code it. Right. We've had Mixup, we've had Soundflow, and now this Bounce Factory app. These are 3 tools that I've been using nonstop, and they've saved me a ridiculous amount of time and brought some of the joy back in actually mixing. So it's just kind of going off of that. That's why it's relevant to the audience, is these are things that actually change your day to day and your enjoyment of your work and your efficiency. They're taking the crap out of it. It's very relevant to the audience, and I highly
and
urge
look,
everybody to check it out.
I know. Look, if you don't use Pro Tools and you don't use a Mac, like, yeah, you can't have this. But there are
Right.
people saying like, man, Reaper's done this for years. Well, cool, great, you've got
Mhm.
it. And Cubase introduced like a sort of limited version in their Cubase 10, I think it was. It does stuff like great. That's great. But nobody who's used Pro Tools has had this. And I'm not, there are other products that can do this. And if the other ones work better for you, then you should use them. I'm not ever going to say like my app is the best way to do it. It's the best way for me. And obviously it works the way I think, but I think I've generalized it pretty well. It's not going to be for everybody. And that's
Mhm.
totally cool. And yeah, I suppose maybe Puremix should only have sent to the users who say that they use Pro Tools.
Right.
But did we waste a lot of your time? Like, look, if I can't waste your time for a couple of hours talking about what I've been up to for the last 2 years, sorry, not 10, the last
Mhm.
2 years, then why is it okay to talk with some mixer who mixes music that you don't like?
Right.
Like, what if you
Yeah.
hate everything Steve Lillywhite's ever done? You'd still want to watch that interview,
Right.
I would
Yeah.
argue. So it's actually a really bad analogy, because why would you
It
want
was
to
a
watch
great
it
interview.
if it was relevant? Yeah, okay. I'm going
Yeah.
nowhere with this, so I'm
Right.
sorry if we wasted anybody's time, but it's a
Yeah.
it's a webinar.
Yeah.
Like, you,
Yeah.
you didn't have to get in your car. So I
Yeah.
think it's okay.
So yeah, it does work for you. That it's not high paid work, so now you don't have to sit there and do that for less money while you're sitting there. And yeah, if it makes sense for you, it's going to make sense for you. And if it doesn't, then you
Yeah,
might
if it
not have to bounce
doesn't,
that many
totally
mixes.
cool. Totally cool. But I
Mm.
do think the pricing and the structure of it makes sense for what it is. Because if it is something that will work for you, you're not going to have a problem with the pricing at the end of
Mhm.
30 days. And if you do, then it's probably just not the right thing. And
Yeah.
that's totally cool. And if you're using it for the 30 days and you're like, you know what, if it did this, then it would actually be worth it. That's what the forum is for. Tell me that. And if it's something that makes sense and it isn't just like, I'm not going to be able to write features for one person, because it doesn't work. But it could easily be that you've got just something about your workflow that this almost covers, but doesn't quite do it. I can figure out a way to do it. I put it in the app, then all of a sudden it is worth your time. Fantastic. That's win
Yeah.
for everybody.
Absolutely. Should we tell them about the code?
Yes. Okay,
Yeah.
so now that I've told you it costs $1 million, I'm about to tell you that because Christian is super cool, we figured out that like right before we went on air that we're putting a coupon code up right now. Mark's going to put up
Boom.
a coupon code. Okay, so this is I'm not trying to make this like everybody scramble to go buy it. Like, still, please check out the demo to make sure that it's actually something you want. This will give you a 50% discount on the Pro annual subscription for the first year. So this will save you $250. If the Pro is for you and you're one of the first 20 people to use the code, then there you go. Will there be more codes? I have no idea. Will there be more discounts? I don't know. I'm not saying this is the only time we're ever going to do it. There will actually be some giveaways with some things. So I know at some point there's going to be a contest and 5 people are going to get a year of it or whatever. Like,
Mhm.
okay, but this was just, I was talking to Christian earlier today and just said like, hey, what if we did this? And he's had the great idea of, look, let's, rather than it being like a certain amount off or 1 month free or whatever, let's just do it half off for a Pro annual subscription for 20 people. So that code's good 20 times. There you go. It's the least I can do, I'm sure everybody in the chat is saying.
Racing to get one of the 20.
You
Awesome.
beta tested, you're good. You're good. Don't waste the coupon code, man.
There are 19 coupon codes left. Awesome. Okay. So let's see. There's some pretty funny comments out there. Can you tell us when, that's an Avid question, when Avid's going to drop in one native support? I can tell you that I'm running on an M1 now, and it's pretty amazing.
Apparently, it
native
works
support.
really well in Rosetta. There was like a weird
Yeah.
paste bug for a while where paid plugins were having issues, and that got fixed. And
Yep.
yeah, everybody I know is
Yeah.
running it. I think all the major plugin manufacturers have fixed their paste stuff too. So even if it's not M1 native, it will run, and apparently runs really well.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Yeah. I mean, before the stream, I was doing it was like 150 track mix, and my old computer would have been choking itself, and this thing was at like 35%. It was insane. It's
Nice.
Yeah. Of course, that's how it always is. Like you said, it's always amazing when you get the new computer.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah.
And then in a
We'll
year,
talk in
you're like,
6 months.
"What?"
Yeah, right.
No. But I think we
Yeah.
both do the same sort of thing, which is, you buy the biggest computer you can possibly afford at the time you get it, and it buys you 5 years.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Let's see what else we got.
And obviously, I'm fine with some questions about other stuff, but I figured, we can stay on topic. Great. If not, that's fine too.
Well, yeah, this is great. So Kenneth Wright, after saying what doesn't it do, asks what is planned for future updates.
The big thing is the crash protection. That's huge. If it can relaunch Pro Tools, then that's gigantic. I've already got the code where I know if Pro Tools has crashed, I know if it's swatting, and I know how long it's been. Swatting is the spinning wheel of death thing. I know when that happens, and I know for how long it's been happening. So the detection part of it is actually already written. The problem is just like I've gotten like a graduate degree in software engineering over the last 2 years from Christian and everyone else in the forum. And I'm still getting my head around so much of it. But if you think about the idea of this app is bouncing mixes, that's great. And then I've got a little service running in the background that knows like, hey, Pro Tools is still running. Hey, you opened up a new session. Hey, it's swatting now. Oh, it was totally cool. It was just waiting for the bounce to start. It was waiting for the bounce to finish, like whatever. Marrying those two things so that one of them can interrupt the other gracefully is actually pretty complicated. And I just haven't gotten my head around that. But that is the main feature for version 2. Playlists were going to be the main feature for version 2. But then, like I said, I got so fed up not being able to do it that I went ahead and just did it. So that's done. There was something else. Hold on. I might have a list here because I know there was one other, like there are a lot of little things, but I feel like there was one major thing. No, because I ended up doing so much of it for this. Like it didn't support ADMs for a bit, but now it definitely does. I can't remember what there was one other sort of major feature, but I'm also very open to feature requests. Like I've got it bouncing mixes. So what else does it need to do with mixes?
We need Debbie saying that your mix is done.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. She's expensive now,
Yeah.
all that voiceover work.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Nicola asks if now I can interview you, and that's coming.
Is it coming? When is it coming, Mark?
It's coming. It's coming.
Right.
I'm not going to do that on air. Come on.
All right. You're not going to promise. Yeah,
Right.
it is coming. It is.
Yeah.
Coming.
Awesome.
I really look forward to that in a very scared way.
Yes. You should be. It's going to be amazing. Okay. It's going to be that kind of amazing too. I need to charge one of these earbuds here. Let me get another question going. Oh, can you explain more about how you would set up a level up mix in between the other alt mixes? So maybe one more time on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me move the browser window out so we don't get 70s video feedback. So the main thing to understand is that when you say bounce any of these things, what it does is it says, hey, that mix pass is part of this snapshot. And I need to recall the snapshot. And then actually, hold on a second, because I almost showed you my phone number. You're not getting my phone number that easy. It's not going to happen. I'm going to put in the generic American phone number, 555-1212. Okay.
Pause. Go back.
No, I got it off the screen, man. You can't get it. You can't get it. So this screen defines when you recall a snapshot, what will it recall? And if you turn on main tracks data, you can then granularly say, I need to get some of the main data and I need to get volume. So what this means is every time you switch snapshots, it will import the volume information from that snapshot. So now let's say, I won't go through any of the extra mix passes, but let's just say I need to print a main mix and a vocal up. Like that's all I need to print for this song. So I'm going to say, just for fun here, I'll do it the way I actually do it. I'm going to coalesce the VCA automation because this will make life easy. Okay. So now both of these trims are sitting at 0. So I can say 0 for main and 0 for main. And that way I remember which my main mix was. So I'm going to take a snapshot. And I'm going to call this best song ever main mix. And I'm going to recall from my last snapshot. So I know that it's going to do the export and 4824-bit, doing that. That's all fine. The bounce files folder will actually go ahead and export. And I want that put on this print track. So I'm going to capture my track. Now that's my main mix ready to go. And it's going to export a 44.116 of it as well. And why don't I select this bit so we know we're actually going to get some audio in our mixes so we can see them on the playlist when it's done. So I'm going to say, well, great, that's all I need in the snapshot. Now, what I really would have done is I would have added my TV, my instrumental, my acapella, all the stuff where the level is going to be the same for everything. Say proceed, and oh, look at that. It's going to say, hey, there's a file conflict. You've already got a file in that spot. So you can either choose a new path or redo the bounce settings. I'll redo the bounce settings. We'll just call this main mix V2. So it knows that it would be trying to overwrite something, and that's no good. There is so much error checking inside of this app. I can't begin to tell you. Basically, anything that can go wrong is being looked out for to be worked around. So it just keeps churning out mixes unless Pro Tools crashes. Okay, so I'm going to call this main mix V2. Dun, dun, dun. And it's grabbing all the info. Now it's setting the window back the way I had it. You notice track heights are changing and stuff, so everything's going back. Okay, so that's there. So now, here, and I'll close up the folders because we don't need that. So now I'm just going to say, turning this up 0.5 dB. Normally my vocal ups are just 0.5 dB because there's so much parallel stuff going on that's probably turning it up more than 0.5. So that's the level for my vocal up. Now I'm going to take a new snapshot, and I'm going to call this vocal up 2. And everything else is going to be exactly like my last pass. And all I have to do is say, give me that track. Right? So that's how fast it is to set up another pass. But this snapshot will have these levels in it. And I will say proceed. And this is my vocal up 2. And that's all fine. And then what we'll do is let's go ahead and I'll close up all the folders so that we can definitely see those tracks. And I'll leave it importing the volume information in just 1 second. Okay, so now that's in the list. So now let me, I'll close up all folders. So we can basically, well, we can't see everything, but whatever. So hopefully it'll scroll down here. Now I'm going to set this back to the main mix level because why not? It doesn't matter because it will recall the volume for each one of these. So in the settings, I'm going to turn off the alerts because I don't need those because I don't have a proper thing. I mean, it would actually try to do it, but I'm going to turn that off. And I'm just telling it, I could actually turn off the solos and mutes because we don't need them, but it doesn't save you anything to turn that off. Turning this data off, it just makes things less problematic. But I'm going to import the volume information from each snapshot so it will override what's in the session. Okay? Now I'm going to say close, and I'm going to say bounce all, and I'm going to say keep them, because why not? And it is going to bounce the vocal up first. So we will see that those VCAs will get turned up, and you'll also see the import session data dialog come up. So what's it doing now? It's doing the track preset settings. So here comes that. So it's going to navigate to that. It turns off everything except volume, imports that. And once that's done, now it will continue and it will restore the timeline selection, restore the session view, and we should see those VCAs are sitting at plus 0.5. We're not going to see them. You're going to have to trust me. Go on, trust me. There they are at plus 0.5 down at the bottom of the screen. So now we're recalling the main mix, and it will override the volume once again because this is a different snapshot. So all of the mix passes within the snapshot share all of the information in the snapshot that you decide to recall, but you only override the session with what you tell it to recall. So now it's got a separate snapshot that has the volume information with those VCAs at 0, and it's restoring that. And notice that it is doing the main mix last. It seems to do this automatically, but I don't think I told it to do this. So it'll leave the session with those at 0. So now I'm printing my main mix. And it's going to pop it there. And then it's going to go back to my print track after it exports. And now it's going to make some new playlists, and it's going to pop those on the playlists.
Andrew, if it was becoming sentient, you would tell us, right?
Yeah.
We need to know that.
Hey, look, my mixes are ready. And there you go. And it set those VCAs back to 0. So that's how you do the volume stuff.
Amazing. Okay, awesome. Let's just see if there's any other questions. One question in here, Tony Draper asks, how do the American prices relate to UK prices?
It's always billed in dollars. It's the way that it works for SoundFlow billing. The amount of stuff under the hood for how the billing works makes me so happy that SoundFlow actually takes care of the store. So all tax laws are complied with. If you have to pay VAT in your country, then you pay VAT. But the prices are all based on dollars. So it's based on the exchange rate.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's taken care of through Stripe. It's one of those, big platforms that does this. So however they calculate exchange rates, that's how you're going to be billed. But it's calculated in dollars. Everything's based in dollars.
Awesome. Okay, so let's see what else we got. If anybody has any more questions, let's get them in now, and you can ask questions outside of Bounce Factory apparently too. Let's see. What if your VCAs are in an automation mode such as Latch? Del Mix asks.
Well, if they're in Latch, if they have automation written, then obviously this won't change. But if you don't have trim automation written, then that's fine. It'll work fine, right? Because Latch it's not like it's going to start writing. If you leave them in write mode, and you bounce offline, bounce online, do they go into write? I don't even remember if they do. I haven't bounced online in so long. But you don't need to worry about it. So if you have breakpoints in the trim automation, then obviously that's not going to work. So what you would have to do is save a new session with new automation. You'd come in, select the whole playlist, trim it up with the trim tool, half a dB, save a new session to do the vocal up. But if you just coalesce the trim automation, then the trim playlist wouldn't have any breakpoints, and you could go ahead and turn it up even if this was in Latch, and it would be absolutely fine. Right. But there's no reason to leave it in Latch. I mean, make it safe for yourself and put them in read.
Right.
But as long as there aren't breakpoints that will override things, and if you want to override it, the reason I put it in was for mute automation. You can set this to off, and the snapshot and the mix pass will remember that track was set to off, and it will turn it off, and then it can mute it even if there's mute automation. But you could do the same thing with any automation on the track.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't make as much sense unless it's mute automation.
Yeah.
But anything that's too complex to do just in a snapshot within the session, then you can go ahead and make a new session. But also remember that if you want to trim it, if there are breakpoints and you just want to trim it, so if we do this, I'm going to go ahead and just add some breakpoints,
Mhm.
right? And we'll trim that down. Now, if I take all of this and trim it up, and then I make a new snapshot, the way the settings work, I'm bringing in volume automation as well. So
Mhm.
I can make changes to the automation, never save a new session for it. The snapshot will remember it. This is why I want to be able to mark a snapshot as the master snapshot, because otherwise that automation will be left however it was on the last mix pass it bounced.
Mhm.
But you absolutely can do it. You could have totally different automation for one of your snapshots within the session. No reason you couldn't do it. The only reason not to do it is you're not positive what state the session will get left in. And I don't like having a mix pass that I don't have a direct path back to. I know if I'm just turning up trim automation on a VCA, I can do that after the fact to match my vocal up mix, no problem. If I'm doing crazy automation changes, it doesn't make sense for me not to be able to get back to that. I would duplicate the VCA and make it inactive for one snapshot and make the other one. You could swap it,
Mhm.
and because it will remember whether tracks are active. So I could say, recall which tracks were active when I made this snapshot. So you could have copies of things that have totally different everything. Or you just save a session, but then not everything is in the same session. But there are creative ways around it using this. This is
Right.
really, really powerful. It's
Yeah.
kind of spooky again.
Right. Let's show the bonus app.
Yeah, the bonus
Yeah.
app. I had actually forgotten about this thing. And I thought, you know what? It's not going to work anymore because I hadn't looked at it in
Mm.
months and months. And then thought, well, let me just have a look and see if it works.
Mhm.
And there were only like 2 bugs in it. So it's
Right.
called session snapshots.
Yeah.
And what it does is it uses the snapshot engine. I'm just going to go ahead and no, wait, I don't want to do that. Hold on a second. Stop it. Hey, I couldn't do it. That's because I canceled. I'm just going to go ahead and delete these guys. Am I going to delete? Oh, it doesn't matter. Okay. This uses the snapshot engine, but it only does things on selected tracks, and it doesn't bounce. So it's everything that's in a snapshot, but it doesn't do the extra solos and mutes and playlists and whatever. Excuse me. It's springtime, pollen. Okay, so let's say I've got a bunch of background vocals here, and I want to try out, like I've got them all panned. I mean, most of them are hard pan, but there are a few that aren't, and I want to try out a totally different panning for these. And I don't want to do a save as, and I don't want to trust undo because I want to try it, and then I want to mess around with some other stuff. What I can do is select the tracks, and I'll just take a snapshot in snapshot 3, and I'm going to call this background Vox original panning. And I better move this out of the way. This is one of the best practices thing is don't cover up these parts of the window. Leave it in the part of the window that's just covering up the audio because the app is never looking at that. So I'm going to get the original panning and it's going to take a snapshot. So it's got everything, right? It's got all of the information that a snapshot would normally have. And it's checking stuff out. Now it's checking out playlists. So it will switch playlists as well as part of these snapshots. And it selects them again, and then it sets your window back exactly how you had it. And then selects your tracks for you again. And this is red only because I stopped it in the middle. I quit the script, so it hasn't recolored this yet. But so now in this slot, we've got background vocals original panning for the best song ever, and it tells me it's 16 tracks. So these don't even have to all be from the same session. These could be from lots of different sessions. And in fact, I was using this the other day on a classical project on one of the pieces, and I wanted to save, I think it was panning. I think it was exactly that. I was repanning the close mics on the orchestra for a section of the song, and I wanted to hear it. And it was so invasive, but I didn't want to do a save as because then A-Being it would take forever because they're gigantic sessions to sort of open and reopen. It sucked. So took a snapshot. So now let's say for some reason, because I'm stupid, I want to hear everything up the middle on these guys, and then I want to reverse the panning on those, and I want to hear these up the middle, and I'm just being really lazy, and I'm going to reverse the panning there, do that, and then on The other thing I'm going to do is I want to hear these without the melodines running, and I want every single one of them to have a Sheps Omni channel, because every track in the world should have a Sheps Omni channel. Okay, so that's like that. And let's say that those are all set up perfectly. So now I'm going to take a snapshot of that. So I'm going to say that this is the BG Vox new everything. I thought I was just going to do the panning, but then it turned out I didn't just do the panning. I did inserts as well, right? So let it take its snapshot. I could have switched playlists at the same time. I just didn't. It's always fun to watch it change the playlists, but I didn't do it. So sorry. Okay. And there we go. So there's my new everything, and that's my original panning. So then I've got a copy of that same thing here. The recall filter is what I actually call it. So for this, I actually want to recall the panning. That's already set up correctly. And I want to recall insert settings and automation, because I want it to do the Melodyne and I want it to add these. So now let's say, all right, I think that sounds better, but I'm not really sure. Let me recall the original one. I'll do that. And like, hey, are you sure you want to recall this? Yes, I'm sure I want to recall it for the 16 tracks. And it will go and reselect the original tracks. It knows which tracks it came from. And it's doing the inserts and the panning. And now it's going to set the session back how it was. So if you had tracks in different heights or whatever, I happen to always have my session the way I need it, because I show everything and everything's always in small. And so that is now we're back at original panning, and like, well, no, I think I like it better this way. Okay, let me recall the other one. All right, that'll set all my inserts back, and it's restoring all the inserts and doing the panning. And now it's going to set the session back the way it was, which in this case isn't really changing much. And reselect the tracks. And there you go. It's the closest thing you will ever get to having two sessions open at the same time in Pro Tools. And it's a workflow that, because of the time it takes to save and recall, like, I don't think of it a lot, but it's actually so powerful that when I remember it, it lets me really, really mess around with stuff in a way that I wouldn't otherwise. Because it's like, how am I going to get back to that thing easily? And importing session data from an old session because I've done something else. Because let's say you do this and you leave it like this, and then you completely re-edit the drums and you change the arrangement. Like, well, hold on a second. What did it sound like before? Because you're only bringing back in the inserts and the panning, you can do it no matter what else you've done. And it's awesome. So that app is free, and it's in the package for free. So if you have SoundFlow, you get this forever. You don't have to pay at all for this. And it uses Snapshot engine to do it. So
Pretty
there you
cool.
go.
Yeah. Awesome. All
Session
right.
snapshots. And there's a deck that does this. So you can assign keystrokes to recall and save 1 through 8. Like there
Yeah.
you go.
Just built it on the side while you were doing this other crazy thing. It's great.
You know what? This was actually, I always wanted this app to bounce mixes, but way, way, way back when, I was having discussions with some people and thought, well, maybe this is the first app to put out.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, no, I got to bounce mixes. Like, I was having to actually bounce mixes. And I thought, I can't spend more time on that thing. I need to make it bounce mixes. But originally, this was going to be the first app in the Snapshot line of apps.
Right.
But if I'd done that, I probably would have wanted to charge money, and now you get it for free. So
there you go.
That worked out.
Awesome. Okay. Produced by Pascal asks, what's the CPU usage while running apps like these?
Almost nothing. I've never noticed anything. And the other thing is, while the bounce is actually happening, nothing's happening. While you're mixing, nothing's happening. The only time it's doing stuff is when you can't do stuff because it's doing stuff. But the CPU hit is almost nothing. Like the offset counter, that's constantly reading the counter out of Pro Tools and doing math with it and displaying it on the screen. That thing is rolling 3 digits past the decimal point. And I've had 10 of them open on the screen and never seen any lag. I don't know how SoundFlow is this efficient.
Yeah.
It's just scary. But yeah,
Right.
there basically it's 0 CPU, I would say.
Yeah. Amazing. Awesome. Is there anything else that you haven't covered? I think you've gone through it.
That's the thing, you know.
Yeah.
Let me move this so I stop looking off to the side because that always freaks me out. Yeah, I think that's it. I think that really you need to mess with it. You got to see if it's the right thing because
Yeah.
it's a big app. It does a lot of stuff, and you're not going to know in a day like, oh yeah, okay, this is for me or it isn't for me. And also, please watch the walkthrough videos. I basically did everything that's in the walkthrough videos tonight, but that will help reinforce it. And plus, they're broken up into chunks, and it's a little easier to find stuff. If you don't remember about you select tracks to say you want them soloed and things like that, some of the concepts might be easier to get out of the videos. And absolutely post in the forums if you got questions or something's not working right or you know. But one of the things I would say, and I won't bother going through all this stuff, watch the best practices video before you start using the app, because there's a lot of dumb stuff that'll go wrong just because you're covering up menus that it needs to get to or stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Just basically put it where the audio is. You nailed it. Yeah.
Yeah. Or if you have a second screen, move it over there. The other thing is you can resize it to be tiny. If you really have no screen real estate, you can make it really small while it's doing its thing.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think you've done it.
Is that it?
Yeah.
I've got to say how nervous I have been about this. This is as close. Well, Low Roar Records, I'm kind of in the band, but I don't have to like go and tour them. So it doesn't feel the same way. This is the closest I think I'll probably ever get to actually releasing an album. And I know you've said like, no, you have to release a modular album that's really noisy, and that could happen too. But it's been really nerve-wracking leading up to this, you know?
Yeah.
And so hopefully you guys will check it out and like it. And if nobody likes it, then I wrote it for myself, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And Mark, I wrote it for you.
Yeah.
As
Yeah. I like it. I'm very happy. So yeah.
So
awesome.
yeah, and don't forget the coupon code, guys. You know, it's not this gigantic rush to go spend money, but whatever. If you use it for a couple of days and realize you're absolutely going to want to use it, and you're one of the first 20 people to do it, then there's 50% off the first year.
Yeah, and that is with the annual Pro member.
Yeah, for the annual Pro.
Cool. Yeah, so if you try to use that on the monthly, it won't work.
Yeah, or I think it might, but then you'd only get half off of 1 month, and what's the point of that? Like,
you'd be taking up a coupon code.
Yeah,
I already took one.
You could, but no, it won't work on the basic plan. Like, you can enter the code, but it doesn't give you a discount. Like, it knows it's for the Pro thing.
Right.
But that was the point, because a lot of people think that that's really expensive. I feel like when you do, hold on, what's the math on that? I'm just going to do the math because I'm that kind of guy. So, so it's $41.58 a month. And if that's not worth an hour or two of your time a month, then totally cool. It's not the right thing. But I think if it's something that really works for you, it's not going to seem so bad when you think it's hard to describe the feeling of saving that much time, I think is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
And if it feels really good to you, that's fine. But you might as well get half off while you're at it.
There you go.
All right. I'm going to shut up about the pricing now.
No, that's great. Awesome. I mean, it's a scary thing. You spend a lot of time building it. So.
Yeah. And it feels, believe me, it feels not arrogant. I don't know what the word is, but saying like my app's worth that much, especially when, as people have pointed out, SoundFlow doesn't cost that much. You know, like you're paying way more than you pay for SoundFlow. And like, well, but SoundFlow is the only reason I could actually build this thing. But whatever. It is what it is, and I stand behind the pricing. And the only thing that kind of makes me feel bad is when people are like, oh, you obviously didn't think about the pricing. I thought about the pricing so much, and had conversations with so many people about it, and this is where it landed. And I'm comfortable with it. So that's that.
Yeah. It definitely makes sense for somebody who's doing a ton of work like that.
Yeah,
I think it was a Tim Ferriss thing.
What's that?
I think it's a Tim Ferriss thing that there's a theory, you know, when it comes to automating and delegating, that if you can say you can hire an assistant for $20 an hour, but you command a higher rate, for your mixing work or whatever. If you do not hire the assistant for $20 an hour and you sit down to do that work yourself, you're in fact only making $20 an hour at that moment.
Yeah.
So this thing can, take care of that for you and all that. So there's all kinds of thoughts with that stuff. But
yeah, I mean, look, and
yeah.
I'm not going to try and talk anybody into
Right.
it. If they still feel it's too much money, then absolutely, obviously, it doesn't give you the value you need to use the app, and that's totally cool. Totally cool.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, yeah, it's congratulations on the release. Congratulations on the achievement.
Thanks.
It's huge. Yeah. Thanks to SoundFlow for making it all possible.
Yep. Thanks, SoundFlow. Thanks, Christian. And thanks for Puremix, as always, for hosting this. The whole Monday thing is still a disaster. I don't know what we're doing next and when we're doing it, but
yeah,
we'll come up with something.
Yeah. Can all go bounce mixes in the meantime.
Yeah, exactly. But
Right.
I'm sure there'll be a mix tank coming up at some point. So
Yep. Yeah. And there's an Andrew thing coming up at some point that Andrew doesn't know about yet. So
yeah, well, I'm really looking forward to that. I'm
Yeah.
scared shitless, but I'm looking forward to
it. Awesome. Cool. I don't know why you would be. It's not like you did a whole YouTube series where you did fake interviews with people and were really mean to them.
Oh, I see.
Anything, but
It's going to be a little guest interviewing action.
I don't know. I'm just
Yeah,
saying,
you get
it's not
Xanthi
like
to
you have
come
things to
on.
worry about.
If you get Xanthi to come on, I'm fucked.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yep. Awesome.
All right.
All right.
Thanks very much, Mark. Thanks for hosting.
Absolutely. I'm going to leave us with the wonderful pooping video again. And Debbie.
Right. Nice one. Nice one.
And yeah, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Are you sick of bouncing mixes?
Yes.
Welcome to Bounce Factory, the automated solution for bouncing mixes.
So it bounces mixes for me?
Yes.
Does it bounce them without me?
Yes.
Does it solo and mute tracks?
You betcha.
Does it switch playlists?
Yes.
Does it bypass plugins?
Of course.
Does it bounce online?
Yes.
Does it bounce offline?
Yes.
Does it bounce stems?
Absolutely.
Does it poop rainbows?
Not yet.
Okay. Can it import the bounces into the session?
Uh-huh.
Can it put the bounces on new tracks?
Yep.
Can it put the bounces on playlists?
Sure.
Can it walk my dog?
Coming in version 2.
Can it export a copy anywhere I want?
Yep.
Can it message me when it's done?
Yeah.
Can it let me know after every bounce so I know what's going on?
Of course.
Will it open and close sessions?
Yes.
That sounds great.
Bounce Factory. Your mixes are ready.